Okay. Good morning, everyone. Hello, Dr. Miller. It's 9 o'clock, and it looks like we do have a quorum, so I think we have to call roll.
Dr. Solicito?
Here.
Ms. Bowler?
Here.
Ms. Laredo?
Here.
Dr. Noland? She is absent for now. Ms. Prado?
Here.
Ms. Berber? Dr. Bradbury?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for coming back today after a very long day yesterday, which was very productive and exciting in its own way. We did have to push out some items from yesterday to today, and they're not here yet to do the presentation. Oh, great. Okay. Sorry. I'm still getting used to the mix. So because we have some presenters today that were already scheduled, and to be respectful of their time, we are going to skip from, I think the next item yesterday was agenda item 8, so we're going to push that back, and we are going to skip to agenda items 15 and 16. Then we are going to go back to agenda item 8 and kind of move down the agenda from there. We do have another item of business at 1 p.m. that will have to honor that time. So depending on how far we get through the agenda, we may need to break, do that out of order, and then come back and sort of finish the regular business. I hope that makes sense. We also will only be taking a half-hour lunch today, so I just wanted to give everyone a heads up so that you could sort of plan your day. Jessica?
All right. So for agenda item 15, we have a presentation from ICVA regarding the NAVLE, and our presenter is Elizabeth Million. And if we can, we see her. All right. So Elizabeth, we can give you the ability to share your screen so you can control the PowerPoint presentation. Moderator, would you mind allowing her to share her screen? And Elizabeth, you're muted.
How about now?
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see my slides. And hey, Jessica, can you let me know, because it's a little hard for me to tell, is that in presenter mode or can you see the full slide?
We can see the full slide.
Fantastic. Okay. Everyone, thank you so much for having me. I know I have a very limited amount of time to do this, so you're going to hear a Southern girl talk very, very fast. So greetings from the East Coast. Thrilled to be speaking with you guys today. My name is Elizabeth Johnson Million. I'm a veterinarian, one of 2 veterinarians on our staff, and I work alongside Dr. Heather Case, our CEO. We all work, for the most part, remotely now. And just a fair warning, it is trash day. So my 2 Labradors could just think the world is ending at any moment. And I apologize if that happens, but it should not. So I just want to let you know that if you hear barking, everything is fine. So let's go ahead and get started. I also want to mention my colleague, Dr. Janine Hawley. She may be logging on at some point. She won't be necessarily presenting. I just want you guys to know that. She's here. She's one of our new staff members as our Chief Innovation Officer, formerly working with the National Board of Medical Examiners. So we're thrilled to have her on our staff now. Okay, so quickly jumping in here, as Ms. Bowler suggested that I do, As you guys may or may not be aware, the ICVA, International Council for Veterinary Assessment, we are a not-for-profit organization, an assessment organization that works sort of adjacent to or with the veterinary profession, but first and foremost, an assessment organization. We have a 13-member board of directors, one public member, which is our wonderful chair, Ms. Bowler, as well as designees from all the organizations that you see listed here. And we also have 5 at-large members. So a very committed group for our board. I want to quickly mention the National Board of Medical Examiners and the role that they play in exam creation for us. So the NBME, I like to consider them whenever I'm talking to NAVLE candidates especially. They're the equivalent to the ICVA, but in the human medical world. They're located in Philadelphia, also an independent not-for-profit organization. Their mission, similar to ours, is to protect the health of the public. So whenever we're talking about why we partner with the NBME to create our North American Veterinary Licensing Exam, obviously I'm gonna not read the slides for you guys. You can see what's on here, but I want you to remember 2 things whenever you think about, okay, well, why does ICVA partner so closely with the NBME? They have a staff of over 500 individuals, so that's impressive considering that we have a staff of 10 who work very, very hard. So we want to make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel and collaborating correctly. We partner with them for their infrastructure and their expertise. There's no other group out there better at what they do whenever it comes to experience and high stakes exams, especially whenever it comes to licensing exams. So want to make sure that whenever you think of us, you also think of them in creation of our North American Veterinary Licensing Exam. So briefly, just an overview of the NAVLE if you aren't familiar. NAVLE stands for North American Veterinary Licensing Exam. Again, whenever I speak to candidates, which is what I do frequently, I tell them that in that acronym, the most important part is the L for licensing, right? The licensing, and a lot of the candidates I speak to, they're not even thinking about licensure. They don't even necessarily know what that means. So it's sort of like a crash course for them whenever we're taking the NAVLE, because whenever they are applying for the NAVLE, they're taking that first step in the licensure process. So an overview of the NAVLE, again, a lot of words, I apologize. I want you guys to see a couple things that I have bolded on this slide and kind of pay close attention to it if you're like me and kind of need the highlights or the cliff notes. The primary objectives of the NAVLE, the biggie, protect the public, right? That's the big thing about licensing exams, the big thing about what you guys do with on the state board. We are protecting the public, ensuring that the individuals who we are allowing into our jurisdictions to practice are who they say they are, and have the competency to do that, which is what the NAVLE plays a large part in doing. The NAVLE also is important because it provides a common standard in the evaluation of candidates that would be comparable from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Again, North American Veterinary Licensing Exam for US and Canada. So we are thankful and very glad that all of the jurisdictions that partner and have a contract with us believe that this is what the exam does, because I can certainly tell you it is true. Brief history of the NAVLE. So the NBME kind of entered into its first agreement with the ICVA to transition to NAVLE into a computer-based exam in 1998. In 2000, any of you guys who are vet school graduates from like the year 2000 forward, maybe you remember taking the NAVLE. That's whenever the start of the computer-based testing for our exam, as well as the USMLE Step 3, in case you're interested for that fun little trivia. So the first NAVLE administration was the November-December testing window, and the NAVLE was the 3rd computer-based test for the National Board of Medical Examiners. So we were kind of at the forefront with them. NAVLE structure. The NAVLE is 360 multiple choice questions. 300 of those items are scored. 60 of those items are pre-test, which simply means that we are incorporating them into the exam. Those 60 pre-test items have no bearing on the score. They are either new items or rewritten items that we want to get statistics on to make sure that they are properly discerning individuals who are high scorers and low scorers. It's broken down into 6 blocks of 60 items, and those blocks are timed. So 65 minutes per block. And whenever it comes to what the NAVLE is made up of, there's a huge process from practice analysis to blueprinting. And then whenever I'm talking about the breakdown of the exams, I talk about it from the species perspective and then the competencies perspective. Okay, now we're going to dive into the sort of nitty-gritty stuff, because maybe for a lot of you that was just stuff you already knew. But I want to talk briefly about reliability and validity. So what is reliability? Whenever you think of reliability as it pertains to this exam, I want you to think of the property that applies to the scores. We can tell you that the scores are reliable. So if one administered the same exam, would it yield the same results, the same scores? Yes, it would. That is what we're looking for with reliability, and that's what we can guarantee with our test. And then whenever we're talking about validity, we're looking at the degree to which evidence and theory support the interpretations of the test score for the purposes of the test. So reliability and validity are two things that we certainly take seriously, and that's why we work with the NBME. I could, and my colleagues could talk about this at length. Given the time that we have today, I just want you guys to be able to, I guess, spout off if I asked you what the presentation that we had together was. I want you to remember NAVLE, reliability, validity are two things that we certainly take into account. So why a licensing exam? Why does this matter? Again, protect the public, like I said earlier, and to provide that common standard. And this is something that, again, for the candidates and sometimes the vet schools and the licensing boards that I speak to, they know what the exam is, and they know necessarily, okay, you're a fourth-year vet student or a graduate, someone coming from a non-accredited school overseas to the U.S. or Canada, and you have to take this test. But what is it for, and why does it exist? It exists to protect the public. So I'm just trying to place a lot of emphasis on that in terms of the protecting the public and that common standard. Now, whenever we're talking about item development and form construction, there's a lot that goes into this. I tell everyone that just one of our NAVLE questions, we call them items, just one of our items is worth thousands of dollars. Whenever it comes to the resources, the time, our subject matter experts working on it, the editors at the NBME, the psychometricians that we work with, one of those is worth thousands of dollars. So this is a high resource process, if you will. But whenever we're developing an exam, it's truly, like I said, it's a collaborative process. That's why we work with the NBME. Here's a high level view of how we would work through the test development process. So we work with our subject matter experts as well as our ADC, our Assessment Development Committee, to ensure that we have the right people writing the test and editing the test. Whenever we're talking about NAVLE creation, every one of these colors on this graphic here, they represent like a separate meeting, a separate group, a separate grouping of individuals coming together. So we have item writing, where individuals are usually at home after they've been trained, which I'll talk about in a second, and they were going to submit questions according to their expertise. So we have swine veterinarians working on swine questions. One of my dear friends and vet school classmates writes swine questions for us, and he's very, very good at it. We have, after the items have been written and sent to the NBME for the initial editing, then we have a review meeting with the item writers, who are all, again, kind of in the same species or area of expertise, where they kind of just take turns reviewing the questions, providing constructive criticism and constructive feedback to determine, is this question measuring entry-level clinical practice competency? Is this question, is it too difficult? Is it too wordy? Are the answer options the best that we have to offer, the most modern picture? Are the sources that we have for each question, again, not from like the 70s or 80s? We're constantly making sure that these questions are the modern picture for entry-level clinical practice. So that's the item review. Then we have the exam construction and publication process. That's where the exam is put together in a form. The form is then reviewed again by the subject matter experts and a recent graduate as well to confirm that it is entry level. And then the exam administration happens, where our candidates actually take the test, and that the candidates play a role in it, especially with those 60 pretest items that they're giving us statistics on. So that's sort of the life cycle, if you will, and that's not even what happens afterward, which is its whole little world. So whenever it comes to item writing, I'm sorry.
Sorry, one question. How long would you estimate that it takes to get through an entire NAVLE creation life cycle?
Oh my gosh. I mean, our item writing workshop takes place in February, and then we do item review. And so item writing workshop in February, individuals are expected to write questions between February and like August. And then the editors review the questions. The item review takes place in November. Then the pool review the form review after that. And then we just had a pool review of statistics of NAVLE questions 2 weeks ago in January, whenever we were in Savannah. So you're looking at like a year and a half.
Thank you.
At least. Yeah.
That just brought up another question. I'm sorry. So this is done every year?
Yes, it is. It is continuous. It's not like a start and stop process. It is a continuous process. Yes. We are never not reviewing items. And Kathy can tell you that. It is a constant process. We are constantly reviewing, editing, and a big part of that, of course, is looking at our pool of questions that we have really good statistics on, or what have you. And a lot of the questions we're saying, like, okay, maybe this drug is not available in the U.S., but it's available in Canada. Well, this is a North American exam. That question has to be tossed or rewritten. Or maybe there's a question that's been written that's in our pool that is too regional, has like a toxin, a tree or something that's only in the Pacific Northwest or only in Florida, like pitheosis, something like that. If it's regional, we don't want it on our test, if that makes sense. So, any other questions? Okay, perfect. I want to be respectful of your time, so I apologize.
Actually, Doctor, I had one question. It's about those 60 pre-test questions. Are those literally before the test, or are those mixed in with the questions?
That's a great question. Thank you for bringing that up. They are sprinkled through. There's no special flag on them. There's no special designation. We want the candidates to take them just like they would take any other question on the test.
And are they actual content questions, like about veterinary medicine?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, they look like any other NAVLE question that you would receive. I tell the candidates that some of the pretest questions, especially over the last like 3 to 4 or 5 years, might be about like aquatics, where we know that we have practitioners who are in aquaculture and practicing with aquatics. But since that's sort of a new and emerging field, and we're just now writing questions on them, and now that we have questions that are written and edited, then those questions have to go through pretest before they can be on the exam. So I'll tell candidates like, hey, in a couple of years, who knows, we might be seeing pretest items that are about beekeeping. And then also within the pretest items, there's going to be very established species and competencies for questions that we have had to rewrite because of the reasons I listed a few minutes ago. If there's a question with a source that's outdated, or a drug or a disease that's changed, or, as you guys well know, the nomenclature for a lot of the bacteria and pathogens, they just change all the time. So whenever that happens, we have to update those questions as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope that answers your question. So any others before I move on to sort of the recruitment process, even though I've basically already told you? Fantastic. Okay, I'll keep moving. So the item writer recruitment process, we have an official call of nominations that is sent out annually. Any individuals who are interested in volunteering their time, we certainly encourage them to reach out. We are typically looking for like sort of certain spots. We are constantly looking for cervid experts. Apologies if my accent is difficult to understand, like deer, cervid species, because those are kind of few and far between. So we have to find individuals who preferably maybe work on small ruminants or on cattle, and then also have cervid expertise. That would sort of be like the gold standard, if you will, of a person that we could recruit to write questions across different species. But we definitely want the experts who work actively on those species. So volunteers selected to cover all topics. So we have practice management individuals involved, public health, epidemiology, you name it. I need to be careful about my abbreviations. Apologies. So if you're interested in volunteering, absolutely let us know. But the item writer training that takes place every February, we started doing it virtually with the pandemic, which has been fantastic for our volunteers. Makes it more convenient for them to go through the training in-house. So all new item writers have to participate in this item writer workshop. It's not necessarily something that's super in-depth, but we don't care if you have had 20 years of experience or 1 year of experience. You have to go through this workshop because, as many of you may be aware, writing questions, especially to the level that we expect, it is difficult. It is something that takes, time and work with our editors to sort of fine tune. And I will tell you that not everyone is cut out for it. I am not cut out for it. I have many gifts in this world, and that is not one of them. So if any one of you are like, oh yes, I taught a course, or I was a teaching assistant, or you teach actively in your clinical practice, you would be probably a phenomenal item writer compared to maybe someone who doesn't have that criteria. So again, it's a process that the NBME leads, and they are very good at it. They are true professionals at training our item writers and then working with them along the way. So the goal is just to provide new item writers with the tools that they need to construct those NAVLE test questions. What items do we need? Okay, so there's a lot to talk about on this slide, and even though it doesn't look like it with the graphic, but what items do we need? So the second critical step in item writing is just creating effective items. And how do we do that in terms of the assignments that we give to the item writers, all of that. So the NAVLE has a blueprint, right? That's sort of the very beginning of the process that identifies the content areas that we want entry-level clinical practitioners to know, and specifies the number of items on the exam that we think should be dictated to each content area. So I'll tell candidates, I don't think I have a slide on this, but I have slides whenever I'm talking to them. Whenever we're looking at the species breakdown of the NAVLE, we have pretty much every species that you could see listed, right? But of course, the big four, that's what I call them, are going to be dogs, cats, and then horses, cattle. Because we know most of our candidates who are going into practice are going to practice on those 4 species. So you'll see more questions on those species, especially dogs and cats, which make up around 50% of the test. Talked about that. It's important to be strategic in about item writing in order to keep the item pool healthy, so that we have items we need to build each exam to specifications if the specifications change at all. And our test development staff produce and review an analysis of the NAVLE pool each year to determine the needs of the pool, like I was mentioning earlier, to determine like, oh, do we need a couple swine questions to be updated? What's out of date? What's not gotten the best statistics? And whenever I mean the best statistics, I mean that we are closely examining a question to determine, are the individuals who are scoring well on the test overall getting a question routinely correct, or are they all over the place, right? We don't love that if they're all over the place. We want them to routinely do well. And then the individuals who are lower scoring on the test, they are more likely to be all over the place. So if the high scorers routinely get a question correct and the low scorers may not, that is a properly discerning question. So that's something that we're constantly looking at in this kind of pool review process, if you will. So each item is coded according to the blueprint. We have, Kathy can tell you, anybody who's been involved in the process, especially pool review, tons and tons of codes according to the organ system, the competency, the disease, the diagnosis. All of that has special coding involved, so that we can use the pool analysis for the statistics to help identify those areas and identify item writing as needed. And then, as item writers, we want to make sure that they code newly written items correctly and accurately. And then the codes are reviewed frequently by the NBME and by our leaders to ensure that the codes are correct in the development process as well. So blueprint, analysis, statistics that we find in the pool review create the need for NAVLE items. Okay, now logistics and timelines. And this is what I spend a lot of time talking about with candidates, because this is sadly what they care about most. So NAVLE, who, what, where, when. This is just sort of a broad overview. The NAVLE is only administered to individuals who are eligible. I like to tell candidates, my husband is an attorney. He couldn't just show up at a testing center and take the NAVLE. He would have to go through a vet school program or one of the things listed here. By far, most of our NAVLE candidates are senior students at ABMA accredited institutions, so especially in the fall testing window. The exam, again, sections are not organized by species and competencies. So Jennifer just asked about the pre-test items. Similarly, each block has a mix between the species and competencies. So I like to tell folks that you're going to get a question about a cat that is having lower urinary signs, and then a dairy cattle that is bloating, and then a practice management question, and then like a public health style question. They're all going to be mixed up in each section. The exam is available in English and French. Again, French for our French-speaking provinces in Canada, we do have testing accommodations available and have a process that we do in-house within our staff for accommodations review. We have two separate testing windows. The test is given at Prometric testing centers, which are all over the world. Candidates who, of course, receive a passing score can complete the licensure in their respective state or province or transfer their scores to the AAVSB transfer service. So again, the exam administration, 300 scored items, 60 pretest items, and then 7.5 hours total of test time. So the pool review, committee review, excuse me, all, again, this is sort of the second half of the process. All pretest items from the November, December administration, so the items that were brand new or recently rewritten that were tested in the November and December testing window are reviewed by a pool review committee in January. So we just had that, like I said, a couple weeks ago in Savannah before our board meeting, which Kathy was at. Items are reviewed for performance statistics, which I talked about, verification of content fairness, that's important, and key confirmation with our coding. We want to make sure all the codes are correct as we're reviewing them in the pool review. Each item reviewed receives a designation to keep and add to the pool bank, to be rewritten and pre-tested again. So it would have to, if anything changes with the question, a comma is moved, a word is moved from one sentence to the next, you add the to the beginning of a sentence, it has to be put through the whole process again. Okay, we take that very, very seriously. If they have to be rewritten to pre-test it again, send to a different exam bank. Sometimes we'll say, hey, this was a good question, but we think it would be better served on one of our self-assessments that we have available, stuff like that. And then sometimes we just say, hey, this isn't a good question. Let's delete it and get rid of it entirely. It's not worth us trying to make work. You know, sometimes that happens. You got to start over. So following that meeting, the pool review, updated pool analysis is created, and then the process begins again. Like I told you, it is a continuous wheel in motion, which is fantastic and also sometimes a little bit exhausting. But these processes that I just mentioned, all of the stepwise how we do things, are integral to the validity of the exam that I mentioned earlier. Hopefully, by listening and seeing all of it, you can agree with that. Score reporting for the candidates. I tell the candidates that the score reports are, sort of distributed securely to them individually, and then a copy goes to the AAVSB securely, and then a third copy of their scores go to the state licensing board that they selected whenever they were applying. So an individual who's saying, hey, I want to be approved through California, they would just select that on their application whenever they're applying for the NAVLE. You guys would get a copy of their scores, so would AAVSB, and then they would. So certain candidates, many candidates will also opt in. You have to opt in for your school to receive a copy of your score report in all of its detail. So that's sort of how the score report process works. I don't have time to really go over the score report in detail, but just, that's an overview. Okay. I don't stop sharing. That was a lot of information, and I hope that I sort of honored the time, not entirely, but I hope that covered everything. Kathy, I hope that's what you wanted, and I'm welcome to any questions if we have time.
I think you did a great job. So I think that you've honored our time quite well. So thank you for that. I had a couple. First of all, I wanted just to say it was good to hear about how you look at the questions statistically and decide whether they're good questions or not. I think one of my concerns when looking at the just pass-fail rates, it was, I think, less on the NAVLE and a little bit more on the NVTE, is some of the high fail rates and whether that's a good test or not. If there's the majority of the students are failing a test, it always, I think it makes me wonder, how fair is the test? Is it an accurate test, and so on? And so obviously you guys are spending a lot of time trying to make sure this is a robust and fair test. So thank you for that. I wondered, on the last slide, the minimum passing score.
Sure.
How do you guys decide on that?
Yes, and that is, that's a whole thing. So we do something called standard setting. So I tell candidates that basically, again, in this continuous process that never ends, right? We have another group of subject matter experts who gets together every couple of years to do what's called a standard setting. And we actually do it 3 separate times. We want to make sure that we are like validating it and able to sort of average it across 3 groups. And these 3 committees of subject matter experts get together and they decide what is the minimum threshold, what is the minimum threshold for entry level clinical practice? What is the minimum threshold? What should an individual be able to know based on, they basically are given like a huge list of questions, like should an entry level clinical practitioner be able to answer this? Yes or no, yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. And we do that with 3 separate panels to determine what that standard would be. And so we do an equating process and a scaling process. So we equate that to a number which is 425. And any individual who is scoring between 0 and 424 with the raw score and the scaled score. Again, this is a lot of psychometrics, and I'm keeping this as high level as I can because that's what Kathy told me to do. Any candidate that scores between 0 and 424 is going to fail, and then 425 and above passes. And whenever I speak to candidates, and I want to tell this to you, I have 3 things, 3 sort of pieces of information I want you to carry with you whenever you hear me talk about this. And I call this my myth busting. So get excited. 3 things. 1, there is no curve on the NAVLE. Okay, so how Kathy would do on the NAVLE, even though Kathy, I love you, she's not eligible to take the NAVLE, but if she was, if Kathy was eligible to take the NAVLE versus how Jessica or how Jennifer did, it would have no bearing. How each of them did would have no bearing on how the other person would do on the test. Okay, it's not like we're looking for a certain percentage of individuals to fail. We're not looking for that beautiful bell-shaped curve that so many of my general chemistry professors were like going for. No curve. Thing number 2. There is no set percentage of questions to pass. This is not like what we would think of whenever you take a test in school. Maybe your kids take tests in school, and they're like, oh, like I made a 70%, so that's a C, or I made an 80, or I made a 65. It's not like that at all because of the standard. Uh-oh, lost my AirPod, but you guys can still hear me. I'm gesticulating too much. So there's no set percentage of questions. And then lastly, and this is the most important thing I want you guys to remember whenever we're talking about scoring and standard setting. If 100% of the candidates in each testing window met that standard that is set, 100% of them can pass. Okay? If 100% of them meet the standard that we have set to protect the public, that is validated, and everything that I just spoke to, 100% of them can pass. Now, that has not yet happened. I'm holding out hope because Lord knows we need them, but that has not yet happened. And that also provides me some comfort because not everyone should be licensed to practice veterinary medicine, right? It's a privilege to be a professional, as my dad told me growing up. So those are the 3 things whenever we talk about the scoring, I want you to remember in terms of how we do it. And if you want to know anything more, our psychometrician in Philadelphia is brilliant, and he talks about things, and y'all, my eyes glaze over, but it is good stuff. It is really good stuff. So would be glad to give you his contact information for your next meeting. He is not quite as entertaining as I am, though. So fair warning.
Melissa, when you talk about standard, just to clarify for the board members and the public, we're talking about a competency standard, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's good for me. I don't know that I need to understand it at any deeper level, but it's nice to know the resources there should we need it. So anybody else have questions for our presenter?
I just wanted to thank Dr. Millian very much, and note that she sort of discreetly changed the slide presentation to try and meet our time limits. So there is a longer, gave us a longer one as well, and you all have that in your email, and I just encourage everybody to look through it. It goes through a little bit more detail about the test, et cetera, et cetera. It's all public information, very helpful. But I really want to thank you, Elizabeth, for doing this and explaining it. And then, and like I say, the next set on our schedule is the form review, which is in April, which will be coming up in April.
That's right.
Form, and a form is the full test, and you have a table with a recent graduate reviewing that yet one more time. So,
right. And I don't get the chance to talk about that a lot. Kathy, thank you for bringing that up. I just want to say that the recent graduate that we bring in, they kind of have the final say, which I think is important, right? The recent graduate can say, hey, like this is not something that is discussed in vet schools anymore, or this is not necessary for an entry-level clinical practitioner to know, right? So we're looking at the competencies, just like Jessica said, right? We're looking at the competencies, certainly. But we also want to make sure that it's like, what is the modern picture of veterinary medicine? And that recent graduate can tell us, yay or nay, and then we'll pull questions in from our item pool. So.
Can I add one more thing? And I know we've got to move on, but I presented some years ago, every few years we do a practice survey. And in 2017 or 18, we did the last practice survey, which was huge. The return and response rate was almost 40%, 38%, which was huge. We had a huge end to draw from that created the new blueprint for the basic current NAVLE. Everything has to get recoded. It added some more communication. It added aquatics, so a little bit more exotics, just some more that people are now seeing. And we would be typically doing one right now, but I think the idea is, from the experts, is we're just trying to wait. The practice, everything has changed with COVID, and everything has, and we're trying to wait till things settle out so that when we do a new practice survey, which I guess maybe might be a year from now or so, I can't remember, it will be more reflective of the current state of the veterinary practice in North America. Then it'll start a new blueprint and refine the NAVLE going forward. We're also working on additional communication assessment ways to assess communication, which we know is very, very important and hard to do with multiple choice. So that's the last of that.
Our ICVA chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, Kathy is the real deal.
We have been very lucky to have her on our board as well. I can't see Jennifer or Ms. Berber. I don't know if they have any questions.
I do not, but I would like to forever refer to Kathy as our wonderful president, as I've heard today. So our wonderful board member, we'll call her.
Yeah, she's fantastic. I had one more comment. I wanted to give everyone a chance to comment, but the one thing that kind of surprised me was the comment about throwing out regional topics, because I feel like we had a review of the NAVLE to see if it adequately covered regional issues in California, so that we could remove our California exam, and I thought that it did have regional topics, so maybe that was just a blanket statement that was more sort of general and didn't fully throw out every regional thing.
Right, and I apologize. Whenever I'm speaking about regional things, I'm talking about like very minute regional things that is not typically taught in vet schools everywhere. That's what I speak to. So yes.
And to clarify too, so the comparison that OPES did for us, they looked at the exam that we were doing here in California and compared it to the NAVLE, and anything that was that we had indicated as California specific on the exam was already covered on the NAVLE. So maybe the NAVLE didn't consider it as specific to California because it's no longer specific to California on what was being tested. It might have been other states, and so that's why they said it was duplicative.
Bingo, exactly. I mean, as you guys know, California is a big state, and a lot of what you guys experience, other folks experience too. So
yeah. Great. Well, thank you very much. I think we need to open this up for public comment. I don't see any in the room. Moderator, can you please open it up to public comment online?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. And audio-only participants can raise their hand by pressing *3 on their device. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access these features and submit their requests. All right, and seeing none, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Okay, well, I wanted to also thank you again, Dr. Millian. I don't know if I'm saying that correct, but thank you very much for coming and for putting together multiple presentations for us and for your enthusiasm and for helping us have great veterinarians.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for everything that you do. I have so much respect for the licensing boards. Thank you for what you do. Kathy, you can never leave us. Thank you for doing what you do. And Sarah, the moderator, has an extremely soothing voice. So if she wants to do a meditation for me, I would not hate it. Thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your week. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, looks like we are moving on to agenda item number 16. This is a presentation from the American Association of Veterinary State Boards regarding the Veterinary Technician National Examination.
And our presenter from AAVSB is Nancy Gritman. Let me see that she is on.
I am on, and I've unmuted myself. I don't know if you can see me yet.
We can't see you yet.
We can hear you.
Moderator, would you mind also giving her presenter right so she can, there you are, so she can share her screen?
Right, so let me get started. First of all, it's great to be with you virtually, and I'm going to get into my share screen here, and then I'll introduce myself. So. And are you seeing my presentation mode now?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, it's nice to be here. I'm Nancy Gritman. I'm the Chief Risk Management Officer with the American Association of Veterinary State Boards. I also have with me Dr. Amy Farmer, who's our Senior Director of Mobility. She recently transitioned into overseeing exams as I move into a slightly newer role with AAVSB. Carol Sparrow is also here. She is our Program Manager with exams. And then Dr. Beth Bennett is our Chief Veterinary Officer. So they joined me for this morning to listen in, and we'll probably stay a little bit longer to listen in on your board meeting. I have been with the AVSB for 12 years, and in that entire time have been working very closely with the Veterinary Technician National Exam. I started as the program manager and then moved in to other roles, and most recently was a senior director of all of our programs and services. So as you are aware, the AAVSB is made up of 62 member board jurisdictions, of which California is. We support the member boards in both the US and Canada. We continue to keep up to date on regulation and the veterinary technician profession, as that is the key aspect of the services that we provide to our member boards. We have continued to have virtual meetings, especially with the member boards who do not regulate veterinary technicians. We're working with them. Of the member boards, there are currently 48 member boards who regulate veterinary technicians. And so there are about 14 that do not regulate, but of those 14 jurisdictions that do not regulate veterinary technicians, there are 6 that are actively in various stages, initial discussions, and or moving forward with legislation to regulate veterinary technicians. And so we work as a staff very closely with them, providing information that's helpful to them around regulation, as well as we work with them on that transition. As you know, the veterinary technician national exam, the primary objectives are to provide the examination services to state and provincial boards charged with credentialing of veterinary technicians, to assist the boards in the mission of protecting the public. Certainly what Dr. Millian also indicated in her presentation with the ICVA and the NAVLE. Again, protecting that public by ensuring that the veterinary technicians demonstrate a specified level of knowledge and skills before entering the veterinary technician practice, and to assess that professional competency of the veterinary technicians in terms of their qualifications, to contribute to the veterinary technology profession through the improved development and definitions of the relationship between that knowledge and professional practice, and to provide a common standard in the evaluation of the candidates that will be comparable throughout from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and the opportunity to facilitate that interstate and interprovincial licensee reciprocity for practicing veterinary technicians. As you may or may not know, most states and provincial agencies do use the veterinary technician national exam, and even those associations who do not regulate veterinary technicians, they also use the VTE as part of their membership requirements. And for those who do regulate, require a passing score for veterinary technicians to be credentialed. In the previous presentation, you also heard about validity and reliability, and that is so very important for the VTE as well. It's not just supported by just one document, by a collection of documents that record the job analysis study and the exam development activities, which includes item writing training and item review and exam review meetings. We'll talk a little bit more about the standard setting study and test statistics. These support reports really serve as the links to the chain of evidence to support the validity and reliability. The AVSB works with PSI, which is our exam vendor, and recently transitioned to a multimodal exam delivery, which includes both live remote proctoring and test center as far as the mode of delivery for the examination. And in that, we've been monitoring very closely to ensure that the scores remain consistent in introducing that multimodal exam delivery. It has especially been very beneficial in starting that in 2023, especially for those individuals that and candidates who may live in remote areas. It goes through the same rigors, stringent requirements for secure test centers as they're being monitored throughout the process. And also in 2022, we migrated to a new exam administration, scheduling, reporting platform with PSI, and also started data forensics, and we'll share a little bit about that as well. So the VT&E committee, per the bylaws of AAVSB, it's an amazing group of volunteers dedicated to the veterinary technician profession. Our leadership development task force receives volunteers applications from not only AAVSB member board members, but recommendations from allied organizations. And so in that, supporting the mission of the AAVSB, adhering to the protocols on confidentiality and code of conduct, which is so very important as you're doing and involved in exam development, providing that subject matter expertise, maintaining the current standards of veterinary technician profession. The VT&E committee meets in person 3 times annually for exam and item review, and virtually every quarter for committee meetings. And additional meetings are scheduled during a job analysis study. In October of 2022, this past year, the AAVSB did convene a job analysis committee composed of veterinary technician, veterinarian, subject matter experts in practice, academia, research to begin the VT&E job analysis study. And that will be completed, is in the process of being completed right now as we speak. And again, the goal is reassessing, updating the VT&E exam specifications to truly reflect the current vet technician practice. And the AAVSB always welcomes interested veterinarians, veterinary technicians as subject matter experts for item writing and review, and we have an application process for that. The committee composition is comprised of 4 members at large, and members recommended by not only the Association of Veterinary Technician Educators, but the National Association for Veterinary Technicians in America, NAVTA, the RVTTC, which is the Registered Veterinary Technologists and Technicians of Canada, and 2 members from the AVMA's Committee on Veterinary Technician Education and Activities. So again, truly representing diverse representation, expertise, and continuity throughout as we're comprising that VT&E committee. So I'll talk a little bit about just in general, an overview again of the VT&E, the exam development process, job analysis, standard setting, and touch base a little bit around data forensics and web crawling. So again, the credentialing exam must be reliable and valid. That is critical to the process. And the exam development process that we use as an organization, that all others who have credential exams use is the standards for educational and psychological testing, those standards. Again, the examination development is founded on examination content outline. Currently, the exam that we utilize now was from the analysis that was completed in 2017. And again, the exam development process includes item writing, item review, examination assembly, and examination review. And based on the statistical analysis of the results for the VT&E exam forms administered, those reports really provide the AAVSB present evidence for the validity of the examinations developed by PSI and the subject matter experts involved. The input and guidance from the subject matter experts really continually provide evidence to support the inference that candidates who pass the examinations are qualified to practice in the job role. So in the job analysis process, it is conducted approximately every 5 to 7 years. This is the 3rd job analysis that I've been involved with. And again, it's to provide a detailed study of job duties, responsibilities of the veterinary technician, to provide a sound basis for the continuing development of the VT&E. And in order to develop that comprehensive survey of tasks performed by the veterinary technician, we provide background materials such as job descriptions, performance appraisal instruments, training documents, job logs. Previous job analysis information is utilized by PSI as we're going through the job analysis study. So in October, we did convene the Job Analysis Committee, again composed of veterinary technician and veterinary subject matter experts in practice, academia, research, to start that study. We contacted our AVSB member boards, allied organizations were contacted to provide recommendations, and then we went through a review to comprise that final analysis committee. And again, ensuring that we had diverse representation in both the US and Canada, a practice background of diversity, years of experience and length of service as a subject matter expert. That survey was emailed out in November and December. It closed, and so the psychometrician staff at PSI worked diligently to compile all of that data. And actually, earlier this week, we had a meeting with the Job Analysis Committee to look at the results and move forward on preparing a recommendation for the new job content outline to be presented to the AVSB Board of Directors in March. Upon final approval of that, the job analysis executive summary report, including the content outline, will be provided to key stakeholders, including the member boards. And we anticipate and expect that the November-December 2023 exam will be aligned with the content outline from this 2022-2023 job analysis study. So very similar to the ICVA on item writing and review, we look for experts that are selected to really represent the breadth and depth of knowledge associated with the job role. Again, that diversity and representation with the US and Canada, their practice background, years of experience, and also we like to have those who have been subject matter experts to continue. Training is very critical. All of our subject matter experts are trained by our PSI psychometricians and test developers. Even when they have been through multiple trainings, they still have refresher training as they prepare to do item writing and review. The training consists of how to use the item submission platform in the secure system that our exam vendor has, how to write effective items for credentialing exams based on those item writing guidelines and principles, an item writing review exercises reflecting sort of those common pitfalls in item writing, and an opportunity for the item writers to apply their guidelines and principles. Specific principles covered, including the writing of items, ensuring that they're clearly written. They truly reflect real life practice within the scope of practice, supported by approved references, are objectively verifiable and defensible. There is only one correct answer, are targeted to the direct population of candidates, and really avoid terms that may cause negative impressions or perpetuates stereotypes. Again, that accuracy, that fairness, ensuring that those items are current and meaningful are important. In the exam construction and final review, this is a snapshot. You don't have to look specifically at that, but it shows you statistics that are gathered on every item, items that are in our pre-test. We have 150 scored items, 20 pre-test items during each exam window. And there are multiple forms. And so we look at all those statistics to ensure that they meet the acceptable criteria to become eligible for use as a scored item on the VTE. And again, as we're constructing and assembling those forms, that they match the exam content outline requirement for content distribution throughout the 9 domain areas. The exam forms are made to be equivalent to form level statistical characteristics and within a range of thresholds. Again, it's very lengthy process, very intense, very meticulous process, but all to ensure that we have a reliable and relevant and defensible entry-level professional exam. Again, what Dr. Millian discussed earlier as far as standard setting, it is not a simple percentage. The passing point is determined in a defensible manner, and the process used to determine the passing score has to be legally defensible. The standard setting study that we'll be completing very soon in this year is using what's known as an Angoff method, and it was conducted more recently in 2017. And again, we'll be using that same methodology to look at setting the standard for the exam. It is related to the difficulty of the items relative to what is expected of the minimally competent candidate. So within those steps, the selection of the subject matter experts, again, credentialed veterinary technicians, and some veterinarians from across North America representing different specialties, educators, practitioners, researchers, defining that competence criteria. What does that minimally competent practitioner look like? And so again, ensuring that we're always writing the items, setting the standards with that in mind. Are there areas that they will have difficulty with? What do we want them to be able to practice safely and competently? There is a rating procedure training that's done within that standard setting exercise as we work through that. And then we look at all of those ratings, discuss the ratings and items if they were answered incorrectly. And again, look at that to establish what that cut score is based on that study that is completed in those exercises.
I have a quick question about that.
Sure.
So when it's not a simple percentage, and you called it, I think, the Angoff method. And from what you're describing, I just want to make sure I understand it. So you're looking at different questions, and some may be very simple questions, and maybe that's scored as a 1, and then you're rating each question for its level of difficulty, and sort of getting more of an overall score from the difficulty of each question, and then deciding what a passing score is. Is that sort of?
Yeah, there's within that the standard setting is rating those questions. The participants in that, the subject matter experts, they're actually taking an exam. It's used as an anchor exam, so that throughout, as you develop different forms, that there are anchor questions throughout. And then depending upon the items, the statistics of those items, you're ensuring that whether an individual, whether a candidate takes an exam in throughout that time frame, throughout those 5 years, that they will score statistically the same, so that ensuring that that is consistent from one form to another. And so it does look at the varying degree, the level of difficulty of each item as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Again, we very similarly look at each candidate's scoring, very similar to the ICVA, in ensuring that those who are scoring very high, that their scores and on each item are very consistent. And that's where you're looking at those statistics. We're ensuring that on a particular form, there's no enemy items, so that if there's an item in one area, that answer won't assist in a candidate answering another question. So that's the detail as the subject matter experts go through each form in looking at those. Again, looking at those statistics for each item in general for the exam, that there's no significant overlap of content between exam forms for exam security purposes. And then we also do look at exam candidate comments. There's opportunity as they're taking the exam. They can put comments in there and concerns. And initially, PSI, our exam vendor, looks at those. And if there's any questions that we need to review, we look at those diligently as well. And so, again, the constant process of reviewing items, looking at the statistics, looking at the performance, looking at the results to ensure that you're consistent throughout that process. And it's always continuous, never ending. We do provide the candidates with, they're able to see their pass-fail results on the computer screen upon completing their exam. And then they do have access to their personal score report on a secure online AVSB portal. The member boards also have the scores that are available on their secure portals as well. We just started working with California in particular, who did beta testing around a data exchange program, so that we can provide those scores through a data transfer process very securely, so they can receive the VTNE scores and the NAVLE scores. And in turn, as they're credentialing and licensing those individuals, that we get that licensure information for our comprehensive Viva database. The schools also receive score reports, so that they can also look at the results overall, and in particular look at the domain areas and see how their candidates, their students may be performing with in comparison overall, and be able to make adjustments if they need to in what they're covering with teaching. They don't see the specific individual reports, but again, overall results, so that they can look at areas that they may need to improve upon. And they also receive a 3-year summary report that is required by the CVTA, so that they can report, provide reports that they need to. And I mentioned just a little bit on the data forensics, web crawling. The data forensics are conducted and analyzed during each exam administration by PSI experts. And that really is to look to see if there are any concerns with the candidates who are taking the exam, to look at in various ways, to look at if there are any, again, concerns around exam security. Web crawling is completed. That's again by PSI experts to go out and look at the item bank, and look to see what study, study tests and practice tests that are available, websites that may have those, to see, is there any correlation to our current item bank and or practice tests? And if so, we look at those very diligently to see, do we need to completely pull an item? Do we need to replace items? Things like that. So that is something that was added very recently with PSI, a new development that they have had available to provide to us. So with that, I'm going to unshare my screen here, and can certainly have any additional questions that you may have.
Thank you so much. I see Ms. Laredo has her hand up.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Nancy. Good to see you. Thank you for
Good
being
to see you as well.
So I have a question and a comment. So my first comment is I really appreciated what you said about there is only one right answer. When
Correct.
we had our state test, I took issue with the trick questions, and we had a presentation where they said there's not a trick question. We put a similar answer to distract a less qualified candidate, and that's a trick question. So I appreciate having one right answer.
Yeah, you always have those distractors.
Yeah.
But they could be, if a candidate didn't know the correct answer, it would be an answer that they may think could be correct. But again, it's not trick. There is truly only one answer. And again, with when we're looking at the statistics and you're looking at those, and you can see the statistics on each of the answers. And so that's in particular what subject matter experts are looking at, to see, is there an issue with that item?
Good. So speaking of subject matter experts, that's my question. With the NAVLE presentation we just had, they talked about specifically not wanting regional questions. Do we have subject matter experts from different parts? I don't know the makeup of geographically where they come.
Yeah, we really do try to, in particular, we always try to have someone from California. I will note that, because there are, again, and when we presented a few years ago, when California made a decision not to have their state exam, because those topics were being covered in the VT&E, but we ensure that the questions that we have are relevant not only to the US, but also Canada. So in our references, we always ensure that we can find references that are supportive in both US and Canada. My example always is that we never have a question on sugar gliders, because unless it's changed, my knowledge was in California, those were not acceptable to have as a pet. And so you're never going to see a question on a sugar glider, because that's a question that wouldn't be relevant in particular in California, and may not be in other areas. So.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm sure you're going to have plenty of questions, so I don't want to take too much time.
Okay.
For
Nope.
being here.
Yep.
Okay, anybody else? Kathy?
Hi, Nancy. I just want to thank you so much, as always, for this great presentation, and the detail you put into it. It was great. Thank you, and the whole team. I just had a question. I know, when did the remote, is it non-proctored exam?
Live remote proctoring, we just launched that March of last year. So,
Okay.
and that was with a lot of review that has been in the testing industry for probably about 4 to 5 years. And so the AVSB, you know, I attend a lot of professional conferences that are specific to exams, and really looked at that until that we felt that we started to see credentialing organizations using that modality. And again, we look at it very closely. Right now, there is about, in the 3 exams that we've had this year, about 14% have utilized that method. And so, but from a statistical standpoint, you know, the pass rates are performing where we want them to be performing at. So.
Okay. So you're getting enough numbers to do some analytics to see if there were any irregularities and all the rest. I just wondered how that was going. Thank you.
Yeah, and so the data forensics that is completed by PSI is on all the candidates. And so very detailed on that. And so we meet after each exam administration to look at those results, and they have already been, if there is a flag on anything, it's already been reviewed by the PSI psychometricians and with their recommendations as well, if we need to do anything with a particular item, or if there's something that we need to do further investigation on a particular candidate as well. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Great. Well, Dr. Gritman, that was a really detailed and informative presentation, and helped me a ton to understand the process. I think some of our concerns, or just, you know, we didn't understand what was the driving force behind some of the very low pass rates in our state. And, you know, there's obviously multiple variables that go into the whole process, including the candidates, the programs they're in, and then the test itself, and how fair the test is, and all of that. I feel confident after listening to your report that you've taken all of that into consideration, and you're constantly trying to improve the test and make sure that it is valid and fair and accurate. And I think some of the test results, the pass-fails that we see, show that, you know, with some programs, we have, you know, almost 100%, sometimes 100% of the candidates passing, which tells me that, you know, it can't be all that bad of a test. But we just wanted to understand it better, and we really appreciate you taking the time to put this together for us, and for doing all that you're doing. I might have to open it up to public comment. I don't see anyone in the room. Moderator, can you please open it up to the public?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And audio-only participants can raise their hand by pressing *3 on their device. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access these features and submit their requests. All right, and seeing none, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. So, Dr. Gritman, thank you again. Thank you so much.
Yeah, as always, a pleasure to be participating in your board meeting, and appreciate all of the board members from California who volunteer on many of our committees. And California is always on the leading edge of utilizing our services, and we appreciate that we can provide those to you. And so some of us here will hang on and listen in a little bit longer to your meeting. Good to see everyone.
Thank you. Okay, everyone, I think we're going to take a quick 10-minute break and come back at 10:30 and go start back on our agenda items. Hello, thank you. Okay, so we are going to be moving on here to agenda item number 8. Jessica?
All right, members. So first, let me start off by making it very clear there's no, right now, that we've seen any legislation related to cat declaw that's been introduced as of now. As you recall, in the last board meeting, the board had a discussion on the idea of cat declawing and prohibiting them, and the board had directed the executive committee that if any legislation was proposed that prohibited the cat declaw procedure, then to oppose that legislation. Since then, I've been contacted by various entities, stakeholders, and potential authors that are looking to address this issue or introduce this issue again in this legislative session. And I share what the board has discussed so far in the prior positions. I share the letters that we provided. But one of the things that I've been asked recently by a few individuals was what did the board think about the proposed amendments that were in AB 1230? And AB 1230, similar to the bill that was introduced last year, also had the prohibition of cat declaw. In April of 2019, there was the analysis by the Assembly Committee on Business and Professions that was written, and in there raised some concerns about prohibiting cat declaw and procedures, and proposed amendments, which essentially gutted the bill and instead replaced it with an informed consent requirement. The board never discussed this because it was published after the April meeting, and then the bill died before the July meeting. And so the board never even had this because by the time you guys we got the July meeting, the bill was already dead, so it was moot at that point. But because the board never had any kind of discussions on it, I wasn't able to share generally what the thoughts were of the members. Because if some individuals are thinking of authoring the bill, I've been asked, well, what do you think the board may consider either not opposing or staying neutral on? And so this was one of the questions. And so I'm not asking for any kind of motion or official position. I'm just wanting to know the thoughts of the board members related to these specific proposed amendments from AB 1230.
Great, thanks. So any discussion? Kathy.
Jessica, I just want to clarify what we're really looking at is page 6, right, where it starts the amendment language, kind of, it's not formal.
Correct.
Yeah, the bottom of page 6? Okay.
Yeah, the very bottom of page 6 where the section says amendments.
Okay, well, my personal thought is, I feel that allowing a veterinarian the language here to determine whether performing a declaw is appropriate within the clinical judgment for that particular animal in that particular setting is appropriate, obviously. I think that's, and I assume most veterinarians in many surgical and other procedures, they do the same thing. That's just standard practice. So I guess that would, I don't see that being in legislation, but I understand it. I think on the list of things they would be required to discuss, I think it's helpful. In my mind, it might be a little too prescriptive. Many of these things about inherent risks and complications apply to all surgical procedures, and I presume a good veterinarian discusses those. They always do with me, and there's always a waiver form that is signed on a surgical procedure. So I don't, other than the list of all these things, the only thing I worry about listing all these in a bill is just making, some of this is, I worry that it's so many specific things that if a vet doesn't do this, they could get into trouble by not mentioning the, like you get the nail covers and the caps on the nail covers. Those are all useful behavioral tools, I think, for sure, but I just worry about requiring a vet to ask all those things or determine all those things. So those are my only concerns, but in general, it still allows the vet to make the decision, which, in my personal opinion, I think is appropriate.
So you're saying it's really kind of too prescriptive?
Well, I just worry about how you could take this, the list of 10, right? And the written consent, I think, is standard. I mean, maybe there should be general discussion, but I don't think in other procedures we list what a vet needs to inform a client about, because all procedures have potential, problems. They all require pain and follow-up and all the other stuff, it seems to me. So, I don't know. I'm just interested to hear what other people say.
Ms. Laredo?
Yeah, I agree that I'm concerned about it being too prescriptive. My concern is I would never support outlawing it completely. I do live in a rural neighborhood. We don't have sidewalks, we have horse trails. And I had a dog who had his tail docked with a goat castration band. When I was in shelter medicine, I don't even want to describe the things that I saw. So I feel like if there's not that avenue for the surgical procedures, things will be done in a less humane way. That said, I am not a fan of declawing. I think it's a disgusting procedure, but ultimately anything a veterinarian does, they should be discussing with the client. It would be irresponsible for a vet not to explain a procedure and explain to a client that it's actually removal of a bone and rather the claw. So I think the education portion is really important, but ultimately everything that happens in the veterinary clinic is the discretion of the veterinarian. So I appreciate the sentiment behind it, but I think that we need to let our veterinarians make the decisions on this.
I have a question. I'm on page 7 of the meeting materials. In the new proposed 4832 subdivision A, paragraph 7, it says that,
can you just hang on a second, because I'm on a different thing. I just want to pull it up so I know what you're looking at.
this is agenda item 8.
No, I know,
page
but
7. Yeah.
I just had the 80, 1, 2, 3. Agenda item 8. There we go. Okay, thank you for that.
Paragraph 7 would require the veterinarian to discuss that the surgical alternative of tendinectomy is not recommended. In the veterinarian's experience, could there be situations where a tendinectomy would be necessary or recommended?
That's a good question. This isn't something I perform, so
I think that your question is really speaking to the issues that we've already brought up. This is too prescriptive in my mind, and it really doesn't belong in legislation. I think if we start really not allowing the veterinarian to make a decision with the animal owner at the best interest of the animal, when do you stop? You just keep doing this. I understand exactly what Jennifer said. I understand that the procedure is something that I haven't done one for years. I don't know any. I mean, I don't think it's really. I think that society is kind of performing the removal of this procedure in and of itself, in my opinion. And so I feel really nervous about us trying to, as passionate, I think, as people feel about this, does that belong in legislation? And when the slippery slope is, then when do you stop involving these in legislation? And how, I think we're trying really hard to allow veterinarians to do their job, and if they do a poor job of it, then we have disciplinary action. But this is also, and if you go back to the top of this, it's pretty punitive, and that's not our role. I think that we're not here to punish, licensees. We're here to protect the public. And I think that I just agree with what everyone else has said, and I think your question is a very relevant question, because I think you can't foresee every certain circumstance, and I do think it, depending on the surgeon and the skill and the situation, there may be a reason to do that, so.
Thanks. Ms. Berber?
I just wanted to agree with all of the comments. I think this bill feels, this language feels like it's looking for a problem. And, I'm not sure that this is how you make the best kind of public policy in general. It seems to me that leaving it to the veterinarian's discretion, and they know all of the things that they need to consider to make the best decision for their clients. I think that I would just say that I'm not sure being this prescriptive is actually helpful.
Ms. Prado?
Yeah. I think that the likelihood of why this bill is naming so many things and being so prescriptive is because leaving it up to the veterinarian whether or not to have this procedure or not. The whole purpose of this is to be able to give guidance and a conversation with the owner, between the owner and the veterinarian, in regards to why this procedure isn't perhaps not needed, or what is it's like the conversation. And so I appreciate it because it is semi-necessary in terms of being able to have that conversation, because without this, we don't have anything. And so it's left to the veterinarian perhaps not having that conversation and then just doing the procedure without explaining to the owner, okay, perhaps this isn't necessary. This isn't medically, the first one. Surgically declawing is not medically necessary procedure for an animal in most cases. Scratching is a normal feline behavior. And it's here, and then at the very end, it's like, hey, we discussed all of this. You determined that. Right, and I don't know if that happens now, right? It doesn't seem like that happens now. It's just as somebody comes in, they want their cats declawed, and then that happens, and then it occurs. And there isn't that conversation piece, and I think what this bill is getting at is to force that conversation, right? And at least have an informed consent that we have this conversation. Now, whether all of these things here that are listed are all necessary, could this perhaps be cut down in a way that we all, veterinarians can all agree on and be like, okay, we have the standard form now. And the standard form has the 5 things that we talked about there. We talked to them about, et cetera, and here it is. Those are my thoughts. So I hear what you're all saying as vets, right? Oh my gosh, we have to, number 5, if I didn't say this, now am I going to get disciplined because I didn't say if surgical anectomy is performed appropriate, right? Or what, all that? Understand that, right? And so I think it's exactly what we're here for, to protect the consumer, to also not penalize the veterinarian, but also here to meet both. And in protecting the consumer, it's letting them know, hey, what you're kind of doing maybe isn't necessary. Let's talk about that. But I don't want to, but we're also not trying to completely, I'm not quite sure. I'm at a loss for words now. But those are my thoughts.
Just a very quick clarification. The proposed amendments never actually made it into the bill. The bill itself proposed prohibiting cat declaws altogether. This was an analysis from the Assembly BMP who suggested do this instead. These amendments were not accepted and the bill died. But I just want to clarify, those were 2 separate things.
Thanks. Okay, well, do you have some? Yes. Dr. Swolz.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I appreciate that they're open to amend
the initial proposed bill. And I would say I have to echo the fact that we really have to leave it to the veterinarians' expertise to have that discussion with the clients. But I also see the value of maybe identifying key points and, like have guidance for the veterinarians of what needs to be covered when we talk about the informed consent. But what I do not like is the way that it's written that a veterinarian shall discuss all of the following information, which means now you're requiring everything and you're prescribing what needs to be discussed. So maybe if there's some words missing that can be done, that it could include all of this and providing guidance, but not requiring the veterinarian specifically of what needs to be discussed. But ultimately, it has to be a conversation between the veterinarian and the client.
I need to clarify again, the author and the sponsor's office were not willing to amend it this way. This was just a suggestion to get something successfully through. But again, they were not willing to move on the prohibition. I'm bringing this to you because there's others who are saying, well, what would the board not oppose? And this amendment was brought up, and I said, well, the board hasn't discussed it yet. So that's really but I want to make it clear, the sponsors and the author's office at the time were not willing to accept this.
Dr. Nolan?
So I really appreciate what Dr. Salacito said, and actually when I read this first amendment and got to the bottom of page 6, I was like, well, if we stop there, that's good. But then I also went, well, that's really within the standard of practice right now. You really aren't supposed to do surgical procedures without having a discussion with your clients about the pros and cons. And so I really struggle with why we're heading in that direction to start to prescribe what the veterinarian and the client have to talk about in detail.
Well, I thought when I read this that I should try and, because my knee-jerk is, we shouldn't be, prescriptive in statute and so on. But I thought I might look over this a little bit more and try and do a little bit of research just on these topics, because there was a statement in here, I believe it's number 10 on page 7, that says there's no scientific evidence that decline leads to behavioral abnormalities. So that statement there, it seemed pretty definitive, and I thought, is that true? And I looked through peer-reviewed journals, and I found that there actually is looks to me to be a pretty robust study. I didn't go through the statistics specifically, but there was a study in the Journal of Feline Medicine and Surgery entitled Pain and Adverse Behavior in Declawed Cats. It was a collaborative study out of Houston, Tufts University, and the University of Saskatchewan. They looked at 137 declawed and 137 clawed cats, so they did really good at matching them. They had some that were in shelters and some that were not. And they looked at a whole variety of behavioral abnormalities, and the most significant one, I think, was inappropriate elimination. And they found that there was a significant number of declawed cats that were being surrendered and or being brought to the hospital for inappropriate elimination. I found some other studies that looked at why cats were being surrendered, because I know one of the arguments behind declawing, and I know this isn't, we're not saying should you declaw, shouldn't you, whether it's humane or not, but I just wanted to say there's some numbers out there. And the number one reason that cats are brought to shelters and given up is for inappropriate elimination. So I thought this was interesting, and I just was a little, I'm concerned when there's, blanket statements in there that aren't necessarily, I just don't know that that's necessarily a true statement at this point that there's no scientific evidence. But that being said, I also wanted to say, well, okay, if we gave informed consent, or whether clients had this informed consent, would it make a difference? Would it even make a difference? And there's actually been studies on that. And there's a study in Canada. It was on a human behavioral study, and it showed that after people were informed about other options, they chose to make adjustments in their households over declawing, euthanasia, and surrender. So I found those things to be a little bit eye-opening and interesting, and I just wanted to bring that to your guys' attention, because I feel like this is a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction we have when this topic comes up, because for so long it's really been about not really the declawing procedure, but people wanting to tell us, in statute, what, telling doctors what they can and can't do. So I just wanted to say there is some good information out there. I didn't have, a ton of time to delve into any more of that. I thought it was interesting. There was a comment out of New York where they have declawed, and they have not found that there were a lot of backyard declawing going on. It was one person's statement. I don't know that there's any scientific evidence there. And these people are, of course, invested in the cause, who are making the statements, so they probably have some bias in their presentations. But I thought that was interesting information as well. I agree, though, that this is very prescriptive. I travel around in my practice now to veterinary clinics, so I actually do see a fair number of patients in cages with their paws wrapped. And so this is something that people do, and I don't know that they're probably going over the risks of the surgery, but I don't know if somebody comes in and says, I want my cat declawed, if they're saying, hey, before we do this, there's these other options, and it might be better, and there's a chance that some of these behaviors may occur. And so something that asks doctors to say that, since it's not such a huge procedure, or everybody thinks that not very many vets are doing it, and perhaps they're not, it wouldn't affect that many veterinarians to have to give a little handout that says these are some other options. I think this list here is extensive and a bit much, but for what it's worth, I think that that may not be happening, and it may not be something that we want to put in statute, but I just wanted to have a little bit more of an open mind when I was looking at this topic for today's discussion.
Can I comment on that? I appreciate, what you present, and I think that exactly validates what I've heard from the other board members. Again, this is something that veterinarians need to have a better understanding and the openness to have that informed consent and whatever should be entailed in that informed consent. But I don't think that there's value in putting it in legislation, right? Because the whole thing is maybe identifying this is a procedure that would require an informed consent. That should end there. And maybe the details of it would be something that the profession should be looking out for. Like CVMA can do like outreach, making sure that the membership understands, the studies that has been, that you have mentioned. So again, this is part of what a good veterinarian does. Having that information, being current with all this information. And I don't think, as a veterinarian, I need legislation to tell me the extent of what I would, specifically, like what my informed consent or what my conversation should be with, with my client. Because respect for the profession should, be there, that this is what we uphold the standard of care. So that's just my thought.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I live in a household with 4 to 6 cats, all my life, and I would never consider this procedure. But I will say that in all my work, and perhaps I'm very lucky in the veterinary relationships that I have, every single procedure and medication that I am in a vet for any kind of animal, there is a dialogue with the veterinarian or the RVT, and including spay and neuter. I mean, there's long-term consequences for those surgeries as well, and there's risks adherent to them. So I just think it's part of our standard of care, and there are bad, probably veterinarians out there that maybe don't ask questions and don't do things correctly. But by and large, I think the majority of the veterinarians, because of the Practice Act and because of their own educational training, do have a conversation with clients on every procedure, regardless of what the procedure is. And I worry about putting this information on one procedure into the codes. Then why aren't we going to do that about a lot of other procedures? So anyway, that was my bigger concern here.
Dr. Nolan?
It seems like if our mission is in consumer protection, and if we do feel that there is maybe a lack of some education out there for the consumers in California, would it be appropriate as a board to have frequently asked questions about cat declaws? Or, would it be appropriate for us to actually play a role in educating the client and the veterinarian if needed? But I guess I would like to believe that, just like what Ms. Bowler said, that where those discussions are happening, but maybe that we could play a proactive role, in educating the consumer and our licensees.
I love that idea because, ultimately there probably are a lot of cats that are ending up in shelters that have had, based on these studies, and there's not.
Well, and that's the other thing is we are really assuming a lot of things that we don't know. And that's frustrating because there's a lot of assumptions here. But
regardless, I think that would be the best way to approach it. But I think just not saying anything and saying this is, this topic, I think it's great if we try and take a proactive role and do some educational outreach. I think that would be the better way to go than legislation, in my opinion. But I just wanted to sort of again, have an open mind. I don't see anybody up there with yes, Tara.
In looking at the proposed amendments, again, proposed 4832 subdivision B, this is the requirement for the veterinarian to obtain informed written consent from the animal's owner. And it seems to me that there's 2 scenarios this proposed amendment is attempting to get at. It's one in situations where the veterinarian is determining that there is a medical necessity to perform the procedure, and the other one is where the owner is presenting the animal and requesting the procedure to be performed. So for the first one, veterinarians are already required as part of the VCPR to assume responsibility for making medical judgments regarding the health of the animal and communicate with the client a medical, treatment, diagnostic, and therapeutic plan appropriate to the circumstance. So that's, as we've been discussing, that's already part of existing law. So could the board consider something that was aimed at requiring a discussion or disclosure in circumstances where the owner is presenting the animal and requesting the procedure to be performed, in which case the consent, this written consent document, is inappropriate because the owner is the one who's requesting the procedure to be performed. It would have to be more of the owner is acknowledging receipt of the information about the appropriateness of the procedure for in those situations where the animal is otherwise healthy and there's no medical necessity.
Yeah, so there's multiple procedures like that, right? The ear docking.
Well, but actually, almost everything an owner's request, I'm requesting a spay or neuter or a gastropexy, and then the vet is doing it or giving me I mean, it's not like, some are medically necessary because of a situation or disease, but there's a lot of things that owners come in to vets for requesting. So I assume that interpretation went both ways. If I ask for a neuter on my dog, the vet is going to communicate with me the risks, all the other things related to that neuter, not just accept the dog and neuter, right? And that's part of the VCPR.
But I think what Tara's saying is that in elective procedures, the requirement is different because it isn't a medical condition.
Yeah, I was just going to, Kathy just said neutering is elective. I mean, we do a lot of things that are elective, and when society decides what's appropriate and not, society ends up kind of controlling the pattern of medicine in humans as in animals. I think maybe as a board I hope we have been able to change and adjust and perhaps not rely solely on what's in the law, but maybe we should embrace a larger mission of education as we move forward, and maybe this would be an opportunity to do that. And I know that's a little maybe novel, but maybe it's always been going on, but I feel like, we have an opportunity here to expand maybe proactively the way we educate and protect the consumer.
I don't see any other.
So I appreciate this discussion about this potential alternative, because even the potential alternative to inform about an elective procedure and receive, get the client to acknowledge receipt of the information, even that goes beyond what other elective procedures would require. So that's not a good idea either. But yeah, if the board wanted to come up with an education document just discussing alternatives to declaw for otherwise healthy animals, that may be helpful for the shelters themselves to then provide to adopting owners, to help them understand, cat behavior when they're adopting, and help counsel them and when they're starting to experience difficulties with the clawing behavior.
I know there are quite a few organizations that have been involved with sponsoring this bill in the past and probably moving in the future, and maybe this would also be an appropriate time to try to interact with those organizations and maybe have them help us get the message across. We would obviously have to make sure if it's on our website that, it's factual. I understand that. But perhaps we should reach out to them and try to instigate a conversation about what we could do to help educate the consumer and the public and practitioners.
So this may be something we can ask the MDC to work on. Obviously, we'll need public comment here, but.
Yeah, we would, I mean, that would not be something that my staff would put together. We would need the help of veterinary members, whether it's board or MDC, but yeah.
And we don't need a motion for the MDC to do something. Any other comments from the board before I open it up to public comment? Public comment?
Hi, Grant Miller, CVMA. I appreciate the thoughtful dialogue on this topic and wanted to just provide just some additional factual information that kind of will pick up subsequent to AB 1230, which met its demise in 2019. So AB 1230 was sponsored by the same group that sponsors all of these bills, and the concept of the informed consent language was brought forth by the CVMA, although the language itself actually originates with a public education sheet from the AVMA. And that's where you're seeing that. And we also, our Animal Welfare Committee has also reviewed the literature that's currently in existence, and it's very conflicting what's out there. A lot of these things become opinions of animal behavior specialists, which of course we value those. Those are board certified specialists, and they're of great value in helping to lead where the profession goes. Ultimately, 1230 died. It wasn't heard. It was heard, but they couldn't get a motion and second to pass it because the author opted not to take the suggestion of the informed consent amendment. And given that the sponsor is the same group every time, it would be unlikely that they would want to take those types of amendments now. And in fact, the bill 1230 is ancient. I call it BC. It's 2019 BC, which means before COVID. So it's ancient. That bill, there's been 2 renditions since then. One was in the form of a House resolution, and the other one was in the form of a bill sponsored last year to just, again, perform a flat-out prohibition. And subsequent to the 2019 bill, the CVMA decided to reconvene our Animal Welfare Committee as well as our House of Delegates, which is our advisory body to our leadership board. And we wanted to look at our policy on declawing because, as you know, the CVMA has a longstanding history of protecting the sovereignty of veterinary practice. And for that reason, we would oppose any prohibition of any surgical procedure or veterinary procedure in law. But as a result of our re-examination of declawing, we did publish a new policy on declawing of domestic cats in October of 2021, and I'd like to read it to you now. It's very brief. The CVMA discourages the declawing onchiectomy of cats as an elective procedure and supports non-surgical alternatives to the procedure. The decision to declaw a cat should be made by the owner in consultation with the veterinarian on a case-by-case basis and only for 1, a medical reason for the animal, or 2, when scratching presents a health risk to the owner. The veterinarian has an obligation to educate clients on alternatives to the declawing procedure and what a declawing procedure entails, including the potential surgical complications. A declawing procedure should not be performed unless all alternatives have been explored and attempted. More information about declawing can be accessed here, and then we created an outreach information page. This is available to the public that has the same type of educated materials that you've been discussing here. I will tell you, though, they are largely relying on the AVMA's educated materials because we feel that those are very good. I agree that everything needs to be looked at and reviewed on a constant basis because research constantly changes, but our educated materials look very similar to the educated materials that were included in the Assembly BNP consultants' suggested amendments. So we moved our needle, essentially, with that. And so, as you know, every bill, you have to look at the language of every bill. But I'm not so sure that our conversation would tend towards informed consent at this date. Our conversation may tend towards trying to align anything in law with what's consistent with our current policy. I can't say for sure. We have to look at a bill. But I will tell you that this shift in our policy is what we take to the legislature when we discuss our position on this procedure. Thank you.
Thank you. Moderator, can you open it up to the public online, please?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. And audio-only participants can raise their hand by pressing *3 on their device. I'll pause a moment to allow the public time to access these features and submit their requests. All right, and seeing none, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you. Okay, well, I think that this should be a pretty straightforward task for the MDC, but I think we should participate in that as well, so. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for the discussion. Okay. We are now to an update on pending regulations.
And I'm going to turn this over to Jeff, our policy analyst.
Thank you, board members. So today, we'll go over some of the regs that are still pending. So right now, we're in the process of getting the civil penalties for citation approved. It has been submitted to OAL, and it is with the Department of Finance for their review. We did get some follow-up questions this week on that package, and they've been responded to. So we do expect that package to be complete around February 7th. So we're expecting that to be approved. And that had the changes that included that significantly related to Class A violations. We did not get any comments when we had the 15-day period, so nobody objected to that change.
Quick clarification, instead of significantly related, it was substantially related.
Substantially. I apologize.
I have a question. On the chart that's included in the meeting materials, the first item is civil penalties for citations, and it says its current status is pending board approval of responses to public comment.
Yeah.
So are you past that stage, or it has to come back again to the board?
We're past that stage because the 15-day comment period, we didn't get any comments to that change, that minor change that was in Section A. So it's with OAL at this point, waiting for a Department of Finance to sign off on the
I think
the budgetary area.
Yeah, Tara's looking at the first column. That the, oh God, I keep, here we go.
So maybe double check or not use the older versions of the reg unit regulation tracker.
Okay.
Because it looks to me like the board still has something to do based on that first column, and it does not. It's already with OAL then, right?
Correct.
So it looks like on the far right, it has that is with OAL. It just doesn't match your current status. So maybe make sure that when we're putting this out there that they match.
Yeah, that second little box there. On to the next one, RVT education. That one is with DCA budgets at this point, pending their review. And similar to the uniform standards, it's with budgets, pending their review. Have gone back and forth with some of the questions they had, so they're just doing their end that they have to do internally with DCA. The next package that I'm working on is the veterinary graduate student exemption. That's the package that allows the veterinary students that are in their junior and senior years or recently graduated to become RVTs if they choose. And that package I am working on and preparing for the regulations units to review on their end, and that way we can move forward with that package as well. And so the last one we have are the minimum standards. That one is pending the review from the MDC to combine some of those sections that are repetitive and repeat themselves between the various different types of premise types. That way we can get that package approved by OAL without them questioning why we are repeating the same language on each different various premise type.
So on that one, members, I just wanted to really take the time to thank the MDC, Dr. Miller, CVMA, and Tara, and then our reg unit. Last month we set up a meeting and we just met in a room over here just across the hall and really went through a big portion of it. We're not done yet, but it was it was long, but it was a really good conversation. I think we're making a lot of progress. That's going to make a lot more sense and will be more successful when it is submitted to OAL. But with that, we also know that the same kind of concerns are also in the shelter rulemaking, so we'll be doing something similar once we finish this one.
Can I say thank you very much for keeping that up and running, because that's wonderful. Thank you.
So if you guys have any questions, I guess beyond that.
I just didn't see the shelter minimum. I see it on the list, but on the written memo, but I didn't see it in the chart.
So that one would have been the one below the minimum standards package, but since it has to be reviewed as well as with that one, it's been temporarily removed because that language in that first section for the shelter is mirroring kind of how the similar language is with the other regs.
Okay.
Or proposed regs, I should say.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from the board? Public comment? None in the room. Moderator, can you please open it up to the public online?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And audio-only participants can raise their hand by pressing *3 on their device. All right, and seeing no requests for public comment, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
All right, Jeff, thank you. Okay, you finally get to go. So here's our update. I think Amanda is giving updates for both UC Davis and Western today. So thank you for pushing through and your patience with this.
No problem. Okay, so a few things happened at UC Davis since our last meeting in October. Shortly after the October quarterly meeting, UC Davis hosted the Humane Society Veterinary Medical Association Symposium. We had a few panelists from UC Davis speak, and then we also had a Western professor speak as well, Dr. Jim Reynolds. And then we also had a non-affiliate come and speak named Gwendolyn Ilge. I'm not sure I'm saying that correctly, Ray's Ilge. And Dr. Reynolds and Dr. Ray's Ilge were presented with an award at that time. I believe it was the like Animal Welfare Award. There was something like that. And then on the 19th, the UC Davis Veterinary School had a team go and perform in the AVMA Animal Welfare Assessment Competition in Raleigh, North Carolina. I went. We did not win. But it had been a few years since UC Davis had a team go, and so we were glad to kind of restart that tradition. And one of the things that we took away was we talked a lot with some of the other professors and faculty members. And so in speaking with specifically the University of Guelph, we learned that there are some deficits in our welfare education, and so we're making a few strides in trying to improve the way that welfare and ethics are taught at the first year level. So just a few things we're doing internally there. And then if you wanted any more details, we did a full-fed dairy beef scenario, backyard chickens, Great Pacific octopus, and then there was a live shelter scenario where we actually walked through shelters in North Carolina and basically picked apart what they had set up for us. They had set up some red flags that we were supposed to find, like they were playing pop music instead of classical. It was very fun. UC Davis is also in the process through HSVMA trying to set up, so we have an established orphan kitten project, and so we're in the process of setting up OKP for puppies, so that should be exciting too. And then an update on what I spoke about in the October meeting. So UC Davis is still planning on putting forward a bid to host SAVMA Symposium in 2025. I've been spearheading that project, and I can tell you it's come along a long ways. And so at this stage, we have mostly finalized the documents, and we are now in the process of asking the CVMA to write a letter of support. We're waiting on Dean Stetter to write a letter of support, and then if you guys would like, we would love to also have a CVMB letter of support, so I can be in contact with whoever would like to write it. It doesn't have to come from anybody specific. The idea behind the letters of support are not that they're mandatory, but that they show that we have a network within the state that's willing to support us. And it's a big traditional thing with state schools, where if your school is the public school for the state, that it's tradition that you ask the state programs to support that. So since we're the land grant, whatever UC Davis, it's, anyways. So that is that. And then in April, which will be before the April quarterly meeting, we'll be participating in, SAVMA puts on, it's called Legislative Fly-In. It's a part of the Capitol on the Hill. It's a lobbying event kind of a thing, and so there's 3 days in April where the students are welcome to come out to Washington, D.C., and they lobby for 2 of the bills that the AVMA has decided are most pertinent for the veterinary profession. And so we're in the process of figuring out which student we want to fund to go to that. It's kind of expensive to go all the way from California, but we'd really like to have UC Davis representation. I went last year. The legislation that we lobbied for was the Healthy Dog Importation Act and the Veterinary Medicine Loan Repayment Enhancement Act, I believe. There's a lot of letters in there. It's VMLRPEA, I think. It's the USDA shortage area loan repayment, 5 years work in USDA shortage area and get your loans forgiven. And I believe both of those ended up getting 50 sponsors-ish each, which worked out really well. And so this year we don't have the official legislation release that we'll be supporting, but that should be coming for shortly. I believe there was some conversation about it being controlled substances or something to that effect, so something important. And then, yeah, just continuing all of our access to care outreach, so DePaul, Cavello, Mercer, Knights Landing, all those clinics. And then I am going to try to find my new CVMB representative. I will still be attending in April, but it's likely, if it's okay, I might have a junior maybe come and just sit with me for one meeting just to kind of figure out what their role is, and then I will officially step down at the end of the semester, so April will be my last meeting. And then in exciting news, the class of 2027 has officially been, they've all received phone calls and emails, whether they've been accepted or not, and so now we just wait for them to make their final decisions, and then we'll welcome the class of 2027. So that's it for UC Davis. Do you, at this time, do you want to close for public comment, or do you want me to just go right into Western?
I think we'll take them both, yeah.
Okay, I'll go ahead then. So Alexandra wanted to make sure that I apologized on behalf of her. She is otherwise detained to schoolwork. So Western University hosted the One Health Symposium on November 4th, or it's One Health Day. It's their 5th annual event, completely student run, and this is the first time it had taken place in person since the beginning of the pandemic. The Western U chapter of SAVMA provided information, trivia, games, and prizes centered on One Health. And Dean John Tegzes and Christus Calhoun and Marissa Horton spoke. CVM Professor Tracy McNamara also provided an update on her work with Senator Kirsten Gillibrand on the One Health Security Act, which Gillibrand announced in October of 2022. Dr. McNamara was able to pull together a team of 14 subject matter experts representing plants and ecosystem, animal health, and security sectors that have always been left out, and this team devoted a year and a half every week on Zoom working on this legislation. So since then, Dr. McNamara has created a One Health Security Council and plans to put it at the level of the White House on National Security Council. They also have numerous endorsements, and the bill aligns seamlessly with recent released national defense strategies. And the bill goes beyond an all-of-government approach and rather takes a whole society approach instead. So not just federal agencies, but also taking into account local hospitals and universities. And this is the second time that students were involved in One Health activities because they had also formed a One Health research interest group and are now in the process of creating a Western University Center for Comparative Medicine One Health. And then there's some philanthropy events and announcements. So they are continuing their Street Dog Coalition efforts. And I believe they're either restarting or continuing their downtown dog rescue street clinics, where they treated 23 dogs and 17 cats at the Street Dog Coalition in October. And then they did 191 free preventative care services, physical exams, vaccines, et cetera. And then there were 27 students who represented all of the Western University classes involved in the event and several family members. And the event was co-sponsored by the Street Dog Coalition itself, Merck, and SAVMA. And they're working on hosting another event this spring. And the Southern California Veterinary Medical Association is continuing its work in the downtown dog rescue to provide monthly clinics, including physical exams, deworming, microchipping, and the Western University students, alumni, and faculty are occupying the majority of the percentage in the volunteer pool. The most recent clinic was held on January 8th of this year, where they vaccinated, dewormed, et cetera, a total of 225 family pets. And then she also mentions, so the Humane Society of Veterinary Medical Association recently honored Dr. James Reynolds' many years of service to farm animal health by presenting him with the organization's Humane Achievement Award. So that's the Humane Achievement Award. Dr. Reynolds received the award at the Animal Welfare Symposium at Davis late last year, and this award recognizes veterinary professionals who have made an outstanding commitment to advancing animal health and welfare and to advocating for the humane treatment of animals. Dr. Reynolds is both highly regarded and well-respected amongst the entire Western University student, faculty, and administrative community, and we are really proud of his recent achievement. And that is it.
Great, thank you. Can you go back to the very beginning of your Alexandra's,
yes.
And just tell me what that bill was? My mind wandered for a second, and you were through it, the One Health initiative thing.
Sure. You're talking about the One Health Security Act with Dr.
That's it.
McNamara? Yeah, I don't have any specific numbers. Like, I don't have the actual bill code.
That's okay. I just wanted the name of it. Thank you very much. Any questions from the board? Yes, Kathy.
Thank you very much, Mandy, and thank you for giving the report for Western as well. I just wanted to say on the SAVMA conference, or the SAVMA event, I can help you if you need it with do you have a legislative letter of support from your assembly members or senators, or a resolution or anything? We can maybe work on something like that.
So we do not.
Okay.
The way that symposium bids are typically put together is based on the examples from previous schools. And so over time, it's developed into a very long document. It's about 30 pages. But there are other schools. So the school who will be hosting this year in March is Illinois at Champaign-Urbana. And so the letters of support that they have are from their dean and their academic team. And then they have one from their state organization, so ISBMA. And then they have a letter of support from their student body. So if we wanted to get legislative support, I'm sure that would be welcomed.
Well, when you mentioned state school, I thought, oh, legislator, board of regents, I don't know. But
well, you can make the list longer.
Yeah.
Because then they can
just let
base it on your list next time.
Yeah. But it would be welcome for sure.
Okay. Well, we'll talk.
Dr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mandy, very much. You may not know the answer to this, but do you know where they are in their search for a new dean at Western? Did they mention? Probably not.
I do not know. I'm so sorry.
No, shouldn't probably be something,
Dr. Nolan, at the Board of Governors meeting, Dr. McClear, thank you. She talked about that, and it's still open. Yeah.
There's not much online on their website, so it's hard to know where they are.
Is there anything prohibiting us from writing a letter of support as a board?
No, you just need a motion.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I'd move that.
I'll second it. Okay, I don't see any hands up by board members online. Do we have any public comment? None in the room. Moderator, can you please open that up to the public online?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. And audio-only participants can raise their hand by pressing *3 on their device. And it appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Before you close that, let's just confirm what the motion is. I think the motion is for the board to support the University of California, Davis hosting the SAVMA Symposium in 2025. Okay, and SAVMA is spelled S-A-V as in Victor, M-A.
And most specifically to write a letter of support. Right.
Thank you.
I'm good seconding those words. Any public comment in the room? The word no. Okay, and moderator, I guess just make sure nobody.
It appears there are no requests for public comment on WebEx. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. We can have a vote.
Dr. Solicito?
Yes.
Ms. Buller?
Aye.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Noland?
Aye.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Ms. Berber? Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great. Well, thank you very much, and we're sad to see you go. It seems like you just started this whole thing, but time does go by. Great job, and thank you very much. Okay, did we want to do the budget first, or I think we probably have time to do both of the reports and the budget before lunch. Okay. All right. So next up is my first report. So I think this is what I was having my nightmares about. And I thought about acting like a leader and delegating this to my vice president, but decided that wouldn't be fair. So in any case, I'm Christina Bradbury, and I am just starting my role as board president. First and foremost, I wanted to thank Kathy Buller. You've just been amazing, and I'm really sad that you couldn't continue to be president because you're terming out, but you've just been so wonderful and so instrumental in so many aspects of moving us in a positive direction and in a collaborative direction, and I really just can't thank you enough, and you were a great mentor to me, so thank you. I'm sure everybody feels the same way. It was a challenging year, and she was really able to navigate through some rough seas like a seasoned pro. Yeah, she was great. Okay, so I haven't been doing this for very long, so I don't have much. On January 4th, the executive team participated in a presentation to Western University. I think it was the first-year students, if I'm correct. It's something we did last year as well. Jessica, Dr. Solicito, and myself, mostly Jessica, presented an overview of the Vet Med board. I think that went really well. We didn't have, I don't feel like we had as many questions at the end, but we kind of went long, so we talked a lot. But it's really well received, and I really enjoy doing these presentations. I believe we have something scheduled for UC Davis in this year in the future, or is that something we typically do? I saw that look, which is...
They haven't reached out, but we can reach out to them.
Okay. And then last Friday, January 20th, I just mentioned that Jessica and I attended the CVMA Board of Governors meeting. Jessica provided an update about current VMB issues. it was my first meeting, and I found it really informative and helpful to kind of get an idea of some of the issues that are facing the profession. I did want to bring up a couple of items that I learned about while participating in that meeting, and one of the biggest things that I think I knew, but at least just had a feeling about, but it was a little eye-opening that the large animal, food animal veterinary shortage in California, they said that the average age of a food animal practitioner is 61 years old, so that's a concern. We don't have people making it through that school and going into the profession, and then I think one of the comments was that if they are in the profession and for whatever reason exit that practice type, that's it. They don't really come back. So I don't know that it's anything where we can get involved as a vet med board, but I did want to bring it to the board's attention. They had mentioned, and you brought it up, Amanda, about what you were lobbying for, and I think that got into the Farm Bill for more money for the federal veterinary medicine loan repayment program. In the meeting, they mentioned that while there was this funding, it was very difficult for California practitioners to qualify for it. In further discussions with colleagues, I learned that the CDFA is, I think, works with this program, and they're looking for 3 open spots. Was what, Dr. Nolan?
Well, I'm just looking at the website, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 from 2022 that were open for 2022, and they're just now recruiting for areas of need for 2023.
Yeah. And I think when we were talking about it, Dr. Nolan had mentioned that that there is like a 50-50 small animal, large animal, and that perhaps some of the tracking in the vet schools is contributing to that. In any case, I just wanted to bring it to the board's attention. And then the other thing that came up that I was not aware of was the topic of xylazine and how it's being used as an adulterant in fentanyl and heroin, and a lot of the overdoses there's like 1,000% increase in overdoses that have xylazine in the system, and there was a very brief conversation about this maybe heading towards controlled substance designation, and I thought that was another thing that we should probably be aware of. And then the last thing from that meeting that I thought was great to hear was that the dean of, I think it was the dean of UC Davis that was there. Yeah, he mentioned that the Access to Care program received a $6 million donation to help expand that, so I thought that was exciting. Other than that, Jessica, Dr. Solicito, and myself have begun our weekly meetings for updates, and those have been going well. Dr. Solicito and myself met once just to kind of get to know each other, and that's about it for my report. I did want to thank all of the staff. You guys have been great. Thank you for all the hard work that you do, and your willingness. I know I send emails at random times, and you guys all address those very quickly, and I appreciate that. And just want to say I'm really lucky to have such a great team with Jessica, who's we think is fantastic, and Dr. Solicito. I'm really glad that you're my vice president, and I'm looking forward to a productive year. And I think if yesterday is any preview, we will be productive. So thank you. I guess any questions from the board? Dr. Nolan.
Running the risk of not being an expert on this, but just wanting to share information. If you go to one of the last year's applications for the loan repayment program, and this example was in Ukiah, the awardee obligation was at least 30% of a full-time equivalent or 12 hours a week in mainly beef and dairy cattle, small ruminant, poultry, and swine. 30% of the practice time needs to be devoted to that. And I think it's really important. I think a lot of students, if they're looking at these, don't maybe open it up to the level of the application and understand that that means that 70% of the time they can be doing small animal as well. And I think it's really important that especially our state veterinary schools really allow students to have the ability to train to do a mixed animal practice, because I think that there are opportunities for loan forgiveness for that.
Thanks. Anybody else? Dr. Solicito?
I just had a thought, like, again, thinking what can the board do to help this, I guess it's a problem, similar to the access to care. I think this is part of it, access to care for large animals. So I guess I'm just thinking out loud, what is it that we can do to help maybe find solutions? Maybe is it up to us to kind of initiate conversations? I don't know if it's an MDC task to try to find how do we connect the dots, right? So, yeah, I'm just thinking that how can we be a more proactive board, knowing that this is a situation that is impacting the profession. What can we do?
Dr. Nolan?
Well, I agree with those sentiments, and I appreciate them. I would, though, like to give kudos to Jessica and her staff, because the link to this is actually right here on the front page of our website. If you go through latest news and announcements, they have been proactive at linking that program onto the website in recent news, so kudos to you for doing that.
Amanda?
I was just going to comment as a budding large animal person. There's a lot of conversation going on in the student body, at least at UC Davis, where we get we do get a lot of information about how to look for careers that'll suit your lifestyle, how to maintain work-life balance, how to apply to all of these programs and grants and whatever it is to help with loan repayment. But there is a large stigma, and I do think it's true, that large animal practice is just not as lucrative. And so, I don't know that it is something that is necessarily easy to fix from a board level, at least. But that is kind of just the stigma that's attached to it, is just that you go into small animal as soon as you leave, because that's where you get, $300,000 a year for working so only so many days a week. And then you hear from the large animal practitioners who come to speak at the school, and they tell stories which aren't necessarily horror stories, but they're trying to be accurate, and I appreciate that. But you hear about how, you're on call every weekend a month, whether it's one or two, both days. And so I think it's more just the practice itself has to shift to adjust to that. But I do think that with the VMLRP enhancement, there's going to be more awards at least. So hopefully that kind of helps as well, and just keeping students informed about the opportunities that they have if they do work in large animal. And I think that was a good point that Dr. Nolan brought up, that maybe students don't know that all you have to do is dedicate 30% or whatever it is of your time in order to qualify. The way that the VMLRP was presented to us at SAPMA Symposium last year was that it doesn't actually, there's three different kinds of awards. There's one for, I believe it's 100% large animal, and then there's a 30% large animal, and then there's also one if you're working in communities where there is an improportionate ratio of animals to veterinarians. And so I think it also counts for small animal practitioners who are working in areas where there's just not enough veterinarians as well. Also, I will be your contact for, earlier in your report you mentioned not having UC Davis CVMB meeting or lunch talk or whatever it was. So I we can get that moving, because UC Davis should come and hear from you guys.
Great. Amanda, I did have a question for you. Is there an option to do a mixed practice track at UC Davis?
Yes. So you can do mixed practice, and it doesn't affect you deeply until you get to your fourth year, and then you just have more strict required clinical rotations, and you have fewer electives. I don't 100% know how it would play into when you go to third year. You can track either large or small animal. I'm not 100% certain what the mixed people do. I think they just choose whether they would prefer to mostly work small animal, then they would do small animal track, and if they would mostly prefer to do large animal, then they would do large animal. That's my understanding.
And you are participating in April, correct? Here with us?
Yep.
Do you mind seeing if you could find out how many people are in that track in each class?
I can just get a breakdown.
So we get an idea.
And do you want them for the entire school?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yep.
Okay.
Sure.
And if you could ask Allie. Okay,
yes.
Thank you. I was going to say Alexandra, but
yes.
If she could do that too. I will say also the Western, Dr. McClure mentioned that they have they're having trouble even placing students for clinical rotations for their large animal, food animal rotations. So anyway, I agree that this, I like that we're at least talking about it. Any public comment?
Grant Miller, CVMA. Just to be brief, I'd like to echo Dan Baxter's comment from yesterday in thanking you for attending our leadership meetings. I feel like while the topics that we discuss are different, the crossover between our leadership meetings and these meetings can be of great value because of the information that we exchange. I would encourage all of you to take a look at the CVMA Economic Survey that was just published. It's available on our website to the public in the resources section. It's a very sobering look at the veterinary profession in our state as it currently stands, and I appreciate this board recognizing that we are in a particular crisis among equine and food animal practitioners. I will say that, while our survey mentions that regulatory requirements present a major burden to 53% of the respondents, I will say that this board's activity this year in listening to the CVMA has been very helpful for us. I feel like Jessica and her staff and the MDC subcommittee that's tasked with taking a look at some of the key regulations has done a very good job at hearing what stakeholders are saying and trying to make adjustments accordingly. The first one of which would be that statutory package relating to the VCPR and telemedicine. I see that as a very important stepping stone in helping to create downstream some other changes perhaps on the regulatory side, which will better help our practitioners to be able to do their jobs here and still provide consumer protection. So I think there is a really valuable balance there, and I think that some of the best way to strike that balance is for both of us, both our organizations, to understand where each one is coming from. And so your participation in some of our leadership meetings is of great value to us, so thank you for that.
Thank you. Moderator, can you open that up to public comment online, please?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And audio-only participants can raise their hand by pressing *3 on their device. All right, and it appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you. So do we think that we should put this on the MDC's radar to look at how we can go down the line here? Dr. Nolan.
Can you reiterate, you mean putting the shortage of food animal and equine veterinarians on the radar? Tell me exactly what you're talking about.
I wanted you to tell me. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, I was, from what Dr. Solicito was saying, is there anything the board could do to, sort of like the Access to Care Committee, that we can do to help with this problem. So just maybe a review, a meeting with the stakeholders, to see if there's anything that we can look at within our purview that could help this situation in any way, aside from what we're already doing by placing that on the website, et cetera. Is that what you meant, Dr. Solicito?
Yeah, actually, after listening to Dr. Grant and Amanda, I'm thinking the information is out there, right? And we just need to have a concerted effort in how to move forward addressing the situation. And I think being more involved with the CVMA leadership on how they're seeing the situation and finding solutions, I think that would be a very first, that would be a good, step. Because I think the MDC, I really would hate to add more to what they're already doing, or else we need to dedicate an entire day of board meeting just for their updates. But I'm just saying is that being more engaged and not be like a passive, participant in the conversation.
Kathy?
Yeah, I worry about the MDC. There's so many tasking the MDC with some really global problems and they have so many specific things to be dealing with, like compounding and whatnot. I think the shortage of veterinarians, and in particular the large animal vets, is pretty well nationwide. It's more regional, and perhaps in California there's things so far out of our control, like the cost of living and things like that, that really, I think the point is communication and networking with partnering and stakeholder organizations. I'm just not sure what the MDC could accomplish. That's my concern, because this is a bigger problem. And working with the legislature, refining regulations, barriers to practice and things like that are all things that we can do. But there's certain things that in this problem is a bigger problem than what I think the MDC or this board could accomplish, quite honestly.
That would be my concern with it, but I just wondered what your guys' thoughts are. Dr. Miller?
Oh, thank you. I appreciate those comments as well. I'd like to point out that this board has already done two of the biggest possible things they can do to improve our situation. Number one, Jessica, under her direction, we were able to eliminate our state board exam, which served as a duplicative, unnecessary barrier to licensure here. And number two, you somehow have taken your licensing turnaround times from months down to days, which is of great value to people who want to come here. So I feel like the best work the MDC can do are the regulatory packages that we need to help our practitioners better understand how to work here, one of which is the alternative premises rulemaking package, and which Jessica mentioned we spent 5 hours on in the room across the hallway trying to help people understand if you want to run a business here and do it, here's how. And so I think that the calories being expended by the MDC on those things probably are the most valuable and appropriate way that this board can help. We've seen a net exodus of veterinarians from the state. Last year, we saw approximately 450 veterinarians leave the state. Now, they kept their license active here, which suggests that they maybe want to come back, but they physically moved out of the state of California, and I would contend that those reasons are beyond factors germane to this board. So I appreciate the work the MDC is doing. There is a lot of work to do at the MDC. We have a parking lot of issues that we still need to work on, where our law has fallen behind and needs to be updated. So I would just echo your sentiment and also encourage you to keep the MDC on track with the rulemaking packages. Thank you.
Sarah?
I also just wanted to remind everyone that the Access to Veterinary Care Task Force assigned to the MDC at the October 19 through 2022 meeting 5 tasks that the MDC is already working on. And that list is actually provided on page 17 of Agenda Item 3. So there's more material there. There's been plenty of conversations that could be reviewed, and the MDC is working on multiple access to care issues.
Great. Okay, I feel good about that. I think we need to open that up to the public online since we opened it up in the room again. Moderator?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. And audio-only participants can raise their hand by pressing *3 on their device. All right, and it appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you. Okay, well, I think that was a good discussion, and we'll just keep that on our radar. And the MDC groups that are already, or subcommittees that are already working on topics, we'll just keep that going. So next up is Ms. Laredo. I'm going to call you Jennifer. I think the Ms. Laredo seems so formal. And I've been saying that. I'm like, I don't know, for her registered veterinary technician report.
Thank you, Dr. Bradbury. I'm going to call you Dr. Bradbury because you're President Dr. Bradbury. First off, I wanted to say I am not part of the executive team. I am the only RVT on the board and by default the liaison to the MDC. So I never report on things that I've attended, but I do want to say that not representing the board, just on my own, I attended a conference for the Multicultural Veterinary Medical Association in November. And given the name, one would assume that it was about equity and inclusion and diversity, which it was, but there was a lot of information as well on alternative medicine and regulatory affairs and wellness. One of the biggest, obviously, being turnover in the veterinary field and retention. But one thing I did learn, which is my new favorite acronym, many of us are familiar with the term DEI, but I learned about JEDI, J-E-D-I, for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. So that's my new favorite acronym, so JEDI. It's a good one. But I also wanted to mention that RVTs, just in general, still do contribute quite a bit. I wanted to give a special thank you to our MDC chair, Leah Schufelt, for the most painful MTC report given yesterday. Dr. Sullivan equated it to having a tooth removed without anesthesia, but Leah did a fabulous job, so she is leading the MDC, so huge thank you to her. Couple of updates for us, just a reminder that AB 1535 went into effect January 1st, so there is the name tag requirement for veterinary assistants, veterinary assistant controlled substance permit holders, and RVTs to have their name in 18-point font on a name tag whenever they're working with the public, and for RVTs that has to include their registration type, registration number. One question that came up that I don't know if Jessica or someone could answer, would that requirement apply to a receptionist working at a front counter? Since they are working with the public, they may be handing medication to clients, giving some instructions. Would that requirement fall on them as well? Does anybody know?
I think they would be considered assistants, and it would. I don't have the law in front of me, but I can take a look at it. I think that, so one point of clarification, the bill itself actually took effect a year ago, but there was a delayed implementation for the specific requirement. And so since then, we've received quite a bit of questions regarding the language that wasn't the greatest, how it's written, and it's caused a lot of confusion. And so I think what our team can do is take a look at the questions that we've been getting and maybe put out an FAQ to help with those types of questions.
Okay, that would be helpful. Another thing that came up was NAVTA, the North American Vet Tech Association, National Association, had a demographic survey. Now, I know the CVMA had their economic survey, so both of those were put out. There was some similar information. The NAVTA demographic survey covered issues like student debt, job satisfaction and wellness, utilization of vet techs. The one thing that did catch my attention was they ranked vet techs salary by state, and California did rank as the third highest paying state for salaries for RVTs. The CVMA had some information on that as well in their economic survey. There was a difference in the amounts. NAVTA reported the average California salary as about $30,000 a year, and I believe the CVMA's was at about $60,000. Now I know that that varies by region and also who takes these surveys that they send out, but it was nice to see that California ranked third as, you know, the highest paying state for RVTs. Another thing that has come up a couple of times already during this meeting is the mid-level practitioner for RVTs, the mid-level professional option, similar to a physician assistant. And the intent behind that was to increase access to veterinary care. Every time we talk about access to veterinary care, RVTs do come up as an option. The idea of the mid-level professional was opposed by the CVMA, by NAVTA. NAVTA wanted to focus more on things like title protection and utilization of RVTs and higher wages. So I know it has come up multiple times, but it doesn't seem like it's the most popular option in the industry at this time. Another change that I noticed, this was something a little bit different. In the state of Washington, they came up with an apprenticeship program. So it seems like it was maybe one veterinary clinic that has this on-the-job training apprenticeship program to offer a pathway to licensure in the state of Washington, and I believe they are eligible to sit for the VTNE as well. And it sounds like it's maybe something similar to our alternate route program, but without having actual educational components outside of that clinic. So I know that in the state of Montana, there was the grandfather clause pathway to licensure. I believe that was last year. So it does seem like that other states are starting to come up with more pathways, possibly just because of the shortage of RVTs in general. And another thing is the alternate route program in California. Just a plea, if anybody has any information on where we can find contact information centralized for all of the alternate route programs. I know that for the AVMA programs, they have the programs all listed on their website, but with alternate route programs, there doesn't seem to be a place online that I can go to find information on, you know, a list of those programs. So if anybody has that information, if you could send it to the board, that would be fantastic. And I believe that is all I had. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Jennifer, Ms. Laredo. No, thank you also for just all of your continued hard work and time that you put into all of these aspects of what we do as a board and MDC, and I just am very grateful for your work. I don't have any questions. I don't see any here in the room. Moderator, can you see if Ms. Berber has her hand up? I don't see her on the screen.
Oh, I apologize. It looks like Ms. Berber may have fallen off. Let me see if she's in the attendee list.
Okay. Oh, okay. She's had to go. So any comments from the public in the room? Or?
All right. This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And it does look like we have a couple requests for comments, so I'm going to go in the order that they were received. First, we have Nancy Gritman. Nancy, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
I just wanted to let Jennifer know, and the board, we work very closely with Jessica's team to provide reports on the California RVT programs. So if there's any additional information that we're not providing to the board that's needed, just, Jessica and Tim can let us know, and we'd be glad to look at how we can assist in that respect. So.
Right, this is the moderator, oh, I apologize. Go ahead, Nancy. You'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning.
This is Nancy Ehrlich with CARTA. My question is a little bit late, but I hope we can answer it. The regulation that's going through that will eliminate the 5-year limit for the alternate route. Does anybody have any idea when that might be able to go into effect?
All right, and this is the moderator. Doesn't appear there are any further requests for public comment. Did you want me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, and then I think Jessica wanted to say something, then I'll get comments from the room. Okay, Dr. Miller.
This is in response to Jennifer Laredo's comment/request for information about alternate route. The CVMA does have a public section on its website entitled RVT Career Information that has information about California approved vet tech programs, RVT distance learning programs, and then task summaries, the job task clarifications that are required for the alternate route. And then we also offer a certification workbook for people, like if you're a vet assistant in a practice and you want to learn how you can pursue RVT qualification through the alternate route, we actually have like a workbook that you can purchase for just a few dollars that will guide you through. And so that's all available on our website. So Jennifer, I don't know if that's what you were interested in knowing, but if there's something else that you feel is not being disseminated to the public, we would really like to make sure we have something on our website. So just ping me on that if you'd like to. And then just one additional piece of information regarding salaries. I mean, when somebody takes a survey, who knows? They could say they make $2 million a year on a survey. You can't verify. And we're lucky enough to survey people who happen to be practice managers as RVTs, who knows. But what doesn't lie is the Employee Development Department, because they compile tax return data from W-2 statements. And so I have second quarter 2022 in the state of California. 14,133 veterinary assistants indicated that their average mean annual salary is $38,751. That works out to $18.63 an hour. 7,200 RVTs from their tax returns, mean annual salary of $46,765, making their hourly $22.48 an hour. So unless they're lying on their taxes, those are the real numbers.
Thank you for that clarification, Dr. Miller. I did not look further into how the data was collected from any of the surveys, so that helps a lot.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to address one thing. A question was about the RVT education package. That's the one that had struck the 5-year limit on the experience and education. As noted on page 4 of agenda item 9 for the status of regulations, it does say that it's been submitted with budgets in December. So we're still waiting on that review. I cannot give a definitive answer of when that will take effect.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, so we want to make sure we take a break at 12:30. I think Dr. Nunez has been waiting patiently as well.
No.
Oh, he's not.
We can do.
Is it okay? I didn't know if Dr. Nunez was waiting. I know we had talked about him presenting. Okay. So just for the folks in the room, we are going to skip agenda item 17 for now, and move on to agenda item 18, the executive management reports. Go ahead.
We'll turn this over to Tim and our budget team.
Sorry, one moment. Let me get this shared for everybody, and I will turn it over to budget so they can present their portion and get back to their work.
So members, while they're coming up here, I do want to point out that we did receive a revised fund condition chart yesterday, and so we'll be sharing that on the screen so you see the difference.
Okay, I'll very briefly go over my staff update. As you can see in the report, we have had vacancies in administration specifically. The receptionist position that we had originally scheduled to have start in October, unfortunately withdrew their employment that day that they were supposed to start, so we had to repost the position, which we had done and made a subsequent offer in December. However, they withdrew their acceptance of the job, and it was again reposted. I'm conducting interviews for that position next week, so I can get that done as soon as possible. Again, our licensing technician, Brian Brahms, left our board in early November. We posted his position. Good news is I have somebody who has accepted a conditional offer. Hopefully they will start, I would guess, around mid-February. And similarly with the cashier position, I have somebody accepted a conditional offer yesterday, and hopefully they will be able to start by mid-February. So I'm going to be getting myself staffed up that way, and you can see on our org chart our current vacancies in the board. But now I'd like to, of course, turn it over to our budget. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Good afternoon. My name is Veronica Hernandez, and I'm the budget analyst with DCA Budget Office. I want to thank the board and the executive staff for allowing me a few minutes to present the board's expenditure projections and fund condition statement, as well as answer any questions that you may have. Please refer to pages 4 and 5 of agenda item 18A. As we stated, there is updated fund condition statement, but I believe Tim's going to post that when we get there. So these documents are what I'll be discussing today. They provide a lot of information on the board's budget. I'd like to highlight some of that information and provide a little more clarity. So first, I wanted to point out that January 10th, 2023, the governor's budget was released, which provided updated budget numbers for the board that includes incremental adjustments to current year, which is 22-23, and budget year, which is 23-24. The documents that I'll be going over today do not include the incremental adjustments due to the timing of the governor's budget release and when these documents were required for uploading. However, I will say that the incremental adjustments for current year was an increase to the overall budget of approximately $40,000, whereas the projections are expected to remain the same. This means the bottom line reversion that we'll be going over shortly will increase just slightly, and we'll have these updated figures to share with the board on the next board meeting unless requested sooner. First, I'm going to start with the board's expenditure projections based on actual data through fiscal month 4. That is page 4. Yep. As a reminder, this document provides the board with detailed expenditures through October, as well as projections through the remaining fiscal year. When reviewing this report, the top portion of the board's personnel service expenses followed with the board's operating expenses. The green columns are prior year, 2021-22. Those are the actual data, and the first blue column is the board's budget as of Budget Act, and the first orange column is the projections to year end. As we move on down to the end of the document, you'll see the board has a beginning base budget of just over $7.2 million. Year to date, the board has expended approximately $2.6 million and is projected to spend a total of just over $6.8 million, creating a reversion to the board's fund of just over $451,000, or about 5.73%. This is considered a healthy fund. The next document I'll be going over is the board's fund condition statement, which again, it was page 5 of the agenda item 18A, but we did find an error, so we've got the amended copy that we provided. As a reminder, we read this document from top to bottom and left to right. I will go a little further into detail on this document for some clarity. The left column is the board's prior year 2021-22 actuals. It shows that the board began with an adjusted begin balance of just over $5 million, collected close to $8.2 million in revenue, and expended approximately $5.6 million in direct expenditures, plus an additional $459,000 in direct draws from the fund to support statewide expenses such as supplemental pension payments and statewide pro rata, for a total expenses of just over $6 million. The board ended 2021-22 with just over $6.9 million reserve balance, or about 11.4 months in reserve. Months in reserve are the amount of time the board can continue normal operations without any incoming revenues. For current year, we are projecting the board to bring in approximately $8.3 million in revenue and expend close to $7.3 million between authorized expenditures and direct draws, leaving the board with a fund balance of $8.1 million, or about 12.2 months in reserve. The board's fund is stable with a healthy reserve through what we can see of fiscal month 2025-26 and ongoing. The budget office will continue to monitor the board's revenue and expenditure and report back to the board with monthly projections as we continue to close out fiscal months. A few other items that I would like to mention. The fund condition is just a snapshot in time. One of the main factors driving the expenditure increase in future years is a result of personnel services adjustments. These include general salary increases as well as employee compensation, retirement rate adjustments. The budget office includes an ongoing 3% increase to expenditures on the fund condition statement to account for these ongoing incremental adjustments. The fund condition does not include increased enforcement expenditures, which could create additional cost pressures to the board's fund in out years. And funds will traditionally show a slight decline for months in reserve due to the conservative projection method displayed in the fund condition, which are expenditures projecting with an ongoing 3% increase and revenue remaining stagnant. Lastly, we would like to note that the board has any future legislation or unanticipated events that could result in the board's need for additional resources, which would increase pressure on the fund. The budget office will continue to monitor the board's fund and keep the line of communication with the board executive staff open for any future needs or expectations. Again, I just want to thank the board and the executive staff for inviting us today to the meeting, and we are happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Veronica. Do you mind just, I think I can see here what the differences are, but do you mind just stating for the record so that because in the meeting materials, they don't have the adjustments on the last page, what was different?
Sure, of course. So I'm bringing it up on my screen too. What had happened was the current year balance, the ending fund balance, I can't see the screen, but that current year fund balance did not transition up to the top to begin the budget year balance. So the ending balance is always the begin balance, and there was a formula issue. Okay. So it just didn't transfer up.
And then is there a way to, like, I don't know how to correct that in the... Yeah,
we can post it to the internet team to get it corrected.
Okay, that would be great. fantastic. Any questions from the board? Dr. Nolan.
Thank you very much for bringing this to us and explaining it very clearly.
Thank you.
I do understand how the expenditures are increasing gradually because of, salaries and whatnot. And I do understand that I'm not sure what the formula is as far as predicting your actual revenues, but it sure seems like, for instance, if you were to take a look at fee renewal revenue, it was over 6 million, I think 6.056 actual, and then it went to 6.130, and then it drops pretty significantly and stays the same. Is that just a conservative estimate, or is that based on any sort of knowledge of?
Yes, so for budget year and out years, we keep revenue the same. We keep it stagnant. That's just that's the method that we use for our fund conditions. Can you go a little bit?
I guess it doesn't seem stagnant, it drops, and your total revenue actually drops pretty significantly.
Yeah, thank you.
I can give a little bit of clarity to that. Somewhere around October, we provide an updated to the workload revenue, so the resources for that. There is a conservative projection in budget year that was done in October, and that's why you're seeing a lower number in budget year, where current year we're seeing 6 months of actual numbers, or 4 months, I think we're doing.
This one's for budget.
4 months of actuals where we're using a straight line projection to identify what we're going to be bringing in for the remainder of the fiscal year. That might be a little bit higher. If it continues to remain the same and there's no changes in licensing or no changes in fees, then the budget year will be adjusted again in October to reflect a possible higher projection in budget year and budget year plus one when we build the next fiscal year's governor's budget. So these are moving numbers. We do adjust budget year numbers again in the fall.
Do you do a rolling average of a certain number of years, or do you do a percentage of what the last year's budget was? Is there some sort of formula, or?
Yeah, so every board and bureau is different. It depends on trend analysis, really. So around fiscal month 4 projections, we look at where the board has brought in previous years in those months. Around fiscal month 4, there's revenue collected in advance, so that could throw off some of the trends. So we look at a lot of different factors when we're identifying revenue projections, but this is more consistent on what was brought in last fiscal year.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions in the room? I had a question. I seem to recall that while we want to have many months in reserve, there was like a number we didn't want to exceed.
Yeah, there's a statutory cap right now for 10 months in reserve, and so, but like they said, this is a point in time, and so right now it's a little too early to discuss alternative measures to reduce that, because you'll see that after a certain budget year, it'll start to decrease. There's going to start to be a structural imbalance. But again, because this is point in time, we want to monitor it closely to see if this is a trend where it's going to continuously grow, or if it starts decreasing, where we just need to see where we're at.
Great. I'm wondering, based on the projections, and I know that this is way more complicated than just saying let's hire some more people, but is there room to look for a couple of temporary positions in enforcement based on this?
So a couple things on that. In the governor's budget that became public January 10, we do have permanent funding for our limited term people. So it's included in the governor's budget. And then also we are looking at limited term staff as well for enforcement. So those types of things would all impact this if we do the BCP to change it. So that is already in the works to do.
Great, thank you. Any other questions in the room? I don't see any hands up from the board members there. Public comment? None in the room. Moderator, can you open it up to the public online, please?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. All right, and it appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you, Jessica, for getting us to this state, and the team. I appreciate all of the work that you've done. This is pretty impressive, considering where we started. Okay, so I think we'll move on in this agenda item to agenda item 18B, examination and licensing.
Okay, thank you. Again, in the memo, we have our updates from the ICVA. This is what actions they have posted to their website and outreach they have done. As you can see, the CIO attended Institute for Credentialing Excellence, and this was covering best practices for credentialing. I think that will benefit overall their testing development. So that'll be very helpful in the development and implementation of future examinations that they develop, of course. And then in later October, the EO or the CEO presented and discussed accommodations that cover testing. So it's not something we deal with directly, but again, this will help future testers achieve parity when testing with not people without accommodations. And again, their newsletter was released on December 15th, has a large number of updates regarding the ICVA, their NAVLE updates, and future work they are doing. For licensing, we have been implementing our continuing education audit program. We have been auditing licensees about 5% of each renewal per month. And of that, you can see the number of veterinarians we have audited. We do have a number who are non-compliant, and currently they would result in administrative action pending the regulation implementation for civil penalties. We could then also implement citations for those in non-compliance. Currently, we are only auditing veterinarian licensees, but we do anticipate auditing RVTs this spring. And for Breeze updates, I think this is a good one. We've been getting a lot of calls in the past few months about having a mailing address instead of solely an address of record for our licensed population. That has been implemented, so our licensed population can now provide a mailing address and have their address of record be a separate address. So they can use their mailing address as, for example, their private residence, and their address of record be their work location. This should help, address any privacy concerns our population may have. Additionally, when our licensed population renews, they are sent an email confirming the renewal and any deficiencies they may have. And finally, another a quality improvement is the rodeo event reporting form has been moved online to a licensee's account, where they can go into Breeze and complete the form essentially through their account. This will greatly reduce staff time in accessing these reports and collating them for PRAs on that matter. You can see our performance measures below. I included more specific numbers instead of just percents, so you can see comparisons of the applications we have received and processed, and including prior years and actuals that we have received to date for our applications and licensees. And I do want to point out that this report normally includes examination statistics. However, I inadvertently left this out of the report. We had met with AAVSB regarding their examination our examination reporting and how they report examinations. And in order to really provide a full picture of how examinations are performing, it would be better to do at the October board meeting, where we will get a full year's worth of testing, which is their testing cycle. So I apologize for not including that with the report, but that was a decision. Yes?
I just want to clarify, you're talking about ICVA
Yes.
and NAVLE testing, not AAVSB and the VTNE testing?
Both. It would be both.
So
Sorry.
they're both in the same, yeah, okay, thank you.
So that way, again, there's a lot of questions about the great fluctuation in passing scores and candidates testing, and this should alleviate that. Do you have any questions?
Great, thank you. Dr. Nolan?
Could you remind me, Tim, I'm on the licensee population page, which is what you have up there, and we have the veterinarian licenses and then veterinary licenses in California. Are those the ones that are actually practicing in California, or what's the difference between that and the second portion of the column up above?
Yeah, I had the same question.
That,
I think we've talked about this before.
Yeah,
but I just can't
remember.
Yeah.
These are candidates who are, licensees who have their address of record in California. So that's the data that we can pull.
Okay, so just to be clear, so the first line on the licensee population, veterinary licenses, 1-star/2 stars. We'll just go to the last column. The 1-star is 15,972. That's including delinquent, inactive, and clear licenses. So that's the total that have.
That's the total number of renewable licenses.
Okay.
So all of these people can renew their license.
Okay. And then the 13,082 are clear licenses.
Those are specifically the current and active license population.
Okay. So then what is veterinary licenses - California, a smaller number, 11,109?
So those are that's the subset of the 13,000 with specifically a California address of record.
Okay. All right,
there
great.
could be part-timers who have an address in Nevada, let's say, but who come back to practice, but choose to have their residence of note in a different state. It could be, they could still be practicing here, but maybe on a part-time basis.
That's correct.
And is this where you got the number, Dr. Miller, that 400 and something that are? Right. So I'm going to say this for the record so that he can hear. So Dr. Miller just stated that you're subtracting the number from January 3rd, 2022, 11,547, and then if you look at 2023, January 10th, it drops down to 11,109. There's the difference. So I would have to argue that I actually know of one person who has gone to part-time practice and has chosen to declare Nevada as their state of residence for certain other reasons.
So in that case, Dr. Nolan, that individual would fall under the 13,082 number because they have a clear and active license that can practice in California. Their address of record, just not California.
Correct.
Great. Any other, Ms. Buller?
Yeah, I just had, and I know we know the answer to this too, but I forgot. Premises registrations exempt. What does that mean?
Those are city, county, and
Shelters?
state shelters.
Okay, thank you.
I had one more.
Yes.
Just because I wanted to go back up to the compliance for the registration, that you had 31% that were not in compliance, but could you define out of compliance? Was it they had no continuing education, that it was inappropriately recorded, that they didn't, what did out of compliance equate to?
They didn't submit proof of completing the 36-hour requirement, so they were missing anywhere from 1 to 36 hours.
And were there some that just didn't submit any of it?
That's correct.
And with those, did they have subsequent documentation that they had done it when you did contact them, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily.
Thank you.
Okay, and then I just wanted to clarify on the licensing process. I just want to make sure I understand. The reason the numbers have dropped significantly is because you were counting not the individual, but the number of applications being submitted, and now it's the same number of individuals per se, but it's just one application instead of two.
That's correct.
Okay.
And that, the multiple applications was affecting
All kinds of things.
all kinds of things.
Yes, it's a much more efficient process for
Yes,
you guys.
much better.
On top of that, we also don't have like the intern application, the temporary applications,
Right.
because those were eliminated. So the total numbers are going to keep decreasing.
And again, our veterinarian population applicants are going to significantly increase come April and May because they're told not to apply until they've met our license requirements.
Okay, great.
And that's the same with the RVT populations. They will fluctuate.
Great. Well, thank you. You've been doing a great job. I looked at that org chart and I was like, oh my goodness. So I applaud you for the work you're doing with such a kind of a skeleton crew there. So thank you for your work. Thanks for the presentation. Any other questions from the board? I don't see any hands online. Any comments from the room? That's okay.
I know everybody wants to go to lunch here. Grant Miller, CVMA. So this 31% noncompliance rate is of great concern to us at the CVMA, and we sense that there may be a need for education and outreach, which is what we like to do. So I have heard conflicting information about when this audit takes place. So one rendition is that they can go through Breeze, they can renew their license, and then they get an email from the staff saying, could you please submit your CE? But then the other one is that Breeze actually asks them in the renewal process, could you please, upload or send your documentation? So how does that work? Like because I've not been audited. I'm on Racetrack, so I doubt I would get audited because all my stuff's in Racetrack. So how does it work?
So the Breeze application process asks, have you completed your continuing education, and you can upload any CE documentation you have at that time.
Okay.
And later, if the licensee is randomly selected as part of our separate audit process, we can access the license file for any CE they have uploaded, but there is no audit process happening as part of the Breeze renewal itself.
Okay.
It is a separate when they get a letter and email from our staff that they've been selected for the audit.
Okay, so then their renewal continues to go through even if they're not necessarily compliant?
Yes, because
I don't think it's required.
It's not. So the only thing that would hold it up is if someone marked no. Then that would hold up the renewal. If they mark yes, that they've complied, it continues.
Got it. Okay, so the next question would be, with the Racetrack, because I see that there could be a lot of reasons why this could be a disconnect, but with Racetrack, is there some opportunity to link the Breeze system with Racetrack so that you automatically see that they have their CE in Racetrack and it's done, or do you have to like physically check Racetrack every time?
We do have to go into Racetrack. There's a board portal for Racetrack and search individually.
Okay.
I can add that I know DCA as a whole is looking at a better way to do this and make it more efficient for everybody. So if there's opportunities for us to create interfaces to talk to other systems to get that in there, we're definitely looking at that as a whole.
All right, and then one last question, and you just said it was just their failure to submit, but what I've noticed is in the wake of COVID, there's a whole bunch of people that did an abundance of CE self-guided online and then not enough live and in person. Have you experienced that at all, or is it that they've done the CE, but they're just the breakdown of what type of CE is wrong, or is it?
It's a mix. We do have a lot of our population who did attend live conferences, but I would have to look into that data further about the specifics of inactive or the live versus non-interactive.
Okay. I see an opportunity for outreach with an article. I write an article called Compliance Corner, and it goes to every vet in the state and the magazine. And I think this would be a really timely topic, given that there's an alarming 31% non-compliance rate. That's pretty scary.
And I do want to clarify, too, that noncompliance, as you all know, during COVID, there was essentially an extension during the state of emergency. And so when we initially started doing the audits after COVID, there were, if they had said they hadn't complied, but they're using that extension, we allowed that. That wasn't an issue. So these noncompliance doesn't relate to that time period.
And I also want to add, some of our licensees have been confused about the COVID waiver for CE.
Yeah.
How that, it did end
October of 2020.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. Okay.
So it also sounds like an opportunity for us to do more outreach on this issue as well.
What I'd like to do, if it's possible, is to write an article with the top 5 questions, and also make sure people know about racetracks. It's actually quite easy to use, and it's nice because it's free, and you just go on there and you put all your stuff in, and it works really well. So I would like the opportunity to maybe write like a top 5, but I want the top 5 to be what you're experiencing, because the questions that I get might not be the same as what you're seeing as being non-compliant issues. So I think that what I'd like to try to do is write an article and then leave it to your discretion as to whether or not you want to comment on it, but I'll send it to you for comments, and you can decide if you'd like to make comments on it.
Thank you. I would appreciate that a lot.
And also the great thing with Racetrack is that all the providers for the race-approved providers are all required to upload that attendance record right into the racetrack, so the veterinarians will have that right there. And so that's very great for us to go in and just see if it's in there, and then we don't even have to do contact the individual if all the stuff is there.
Yes. That just reminded me of a question on racetrack to Jessica. Is it fully, it's relatively new, but is it fully fleshed out? I think maybe it was a non-approved race providers that we still use and accept that weren't all in there yet, or how far along are they in getting it to be totally universal? So
I'll have to double check with Nancy, and I don't know if she's still on the list of attendees. Maybe she can speak to it, but that was one of the conversations that we've had with AAVSB is about the fact that we approve a lot of other sexually approved providers, and we wanted the ability for them to be able to easily upload information. I know that that's something they were working with their contractor CE broker on, and I believe that's something that they can do now. It's not required.
So you use Racetrack and you use what they provide, and for all purposes.
So we would look on Racetrack to see what's there, and then we would write to the licensee and let them know, and then that they've been audited, and they can submit anything that's not in Racetrack.
Okay, so we've had some public comment in the room. Moderator, can you open it up for public comment online, please?
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And it looks like we have a request for comment from Nancy Gritman. Nancy, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Hi, this is Nancy again with the AAVSB, and as far as your question, Kathy, around the the statutorial approved providers, we're the continuing education staff along with CE brokers getting very close to having that available, noting that individuals, however, can input that information directly by themselves, but we are looking to work on getting that in a much more automated process. So it is on an additional phase here that that should be. I don't want to speak without having all the information, but I anticipate we'll have that ready to go here in the next few months. So that's all I have at this time.
This is the moderator. It appears there are no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. And thank you, Dr. Gritman. I'm glad you stayed to answer that question. That was perfect. Thank you for your report. I think that's it. We are running up against the 1 o'clock hour, and we all do need a little time to eat. My apologies to the, is it the administrative law judge, Ms. Lutz, and the petitioner, thank you, that we are going to adjourn and, I'm sorry, recess and come back at 1:15. I'm failing as president in time, time management. So we'll recess. Thank you.